We get a roll call, please, Mr. Natale.
Mr. Kurtz?
Here.
Mr. Strollo? Here. Mr. Natale, me, I'm here. Mr. Mercado?
Here.
Mr. Bowman? Mr. Bowman? Mr. Dawson?
Present.
Mr. Carderas?
Okay, now I'm here.
I'm here.
You're here? That's Mr. Bowman, right?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Carderas?
Here.
Mr. Linder? Mr. Linder?
Here.
Mr. Tedisco?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Here.
Ms. Downs?
Here.
Mr. Somont?
Here.
We have a quorum, 100%.
Okay, thank you. Will everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance. Flag. United States of America. Republic. One nation. Under God. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, for tonight's public hearing, we hear number 1 and number 2 together, zone map change petition, Lamp Realty, and special permit application of Lamp Realty, please.
Absolutely. The continuation of the public hearing for the zone map change petition of Lamp Realty LLC, care of Joseph P. Williams, Esquire, Shipman and Goodwin LLP, 265 Church Street, Suite 1207, New Haven, Connecticut 06510, to change the zone of property located at 50 Hazel Drive, Cheshire, Connecticut 06410, assessor's map number 15, lot number 52, from present special adaptive reuse development district R80 to affordable housing development, section 44A of the Cheshire zoning regulations. Property description of 50 Hazel Drive available for review on town website homepage under documents distributed or displayed during virtual meetings and filed in the Cheshire Town Clerk's office. Number 2, the continuation of the public hearing for the special permit application of Lamp Realty LLC, care of Joseph P. Williams, Esquire, Shipman and Goodman LLP, 265 Church Street, Suite 1207, New Haven, Connecticut 06510, to construct a 114-unit affordable housing development in 2 residential buildings under section 44A of the Cheshire zoning regulations. Property located at 50 Hazel Drive, Cheshire, Connecticut 06410, as generally shown on assessor's map number 15, lot number 52, in the proposed affordable housing development zone. Packet information available for review on the town website homepage under documents distributed or displayed during virtual meetings.
Okay, thank you. So tonight we're going to do things just a little bit different, a little out of order. We left off our meeting last time with a lot more comments that we did not get in because of the late time that we were at. So what I would like to ask from everybody in the public, we've heard a lot of your concerns with the traffic and parking and all, all the concerns that have been in already. So we are going to read all the comments we have first, and then Lamp Realty will be addressing all the comments. But what I would really like to see happen is I would please, we do not need to hear the same issues over and over and over again. We understand they are issues. We've heard them. It takes a lot of time in these meetings. These meetings are not fun, and they're not hard. They're not easy to do. And I'm just pleading that we could please, just any new comments that come in, please, just new comments for tonight's meeting. So with that, Bill, I don't know if you want to start off reading comments, or is it Suzanne, or you're on mute, I think.
Suzanne, if I may, Suzanne Simone is going to be reading the comments into the record.
Okay, so we're going to go with that first, and whenever you're ready, Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Okay, comments from the fire department. They are revised comments. The fire department has reviewed the above application for the planning and zoning process. We recommend the following comments, stipulations. If this application is approved, code compliant plans must be submitted to the building office and fire marshal's office prior to construction. Number 1, please provide a truck turning movement plan for the site. Mountable curb will need to be installed in areas to be determined by the fire chief. Number 2, the locations of the large plantings, trees, and light poles will need to be coordinated with the fire department to ensure emergency vehicle access. Number 3, the dimensions of the proposed island will need to be accommodated for the turning of fire vehicles. Number 4, standpipes will need to be installed in all the stairways and possibly in locations to be determined by the fire chief in the underground parking areas. Number 5, The ventilation fans for the underground garage will need to be reversible and have fire department override controls. Number 6, the proposed water main layout will need to be improved to conform with town standards. Fire hydrants will be required in the front and rear of the structures. The final design, water main sizes, layout, and number of fire hydrants will need to be approved by the fire chief or his designee. Number 8, a key box system approved by the fire department will need to be installed on each building with access keys provided for all portions of the building. Number 9, all parking will need to be designated parking spaces with no parking allowed in the roadways internal to the development. Appropriate signage will be required. Number 10, all stair towers and the separation between the underground garage shall be rated construction. On July 22nd, 2020, the planning office received a call regarding the numbers that were stated at the last meeting having to do with the petitions, and there are corrections. The petition to stop the zone change had 152 signatures, 33 of them were out of town, and 3 had no addresses at all. The petition to remove the Hazel Drive special permit application hearing from the agenda until there's in-person meetings had 165 signatures, with 31 of those being out of town. So those corrected numbers should be reflected in the minutes. Additionally, the afternoon of July 24th, 2020, we received additional signage, 23 signatures, 12 of which are out of town, in the petition to stop the zone change. Okay, now for the comments. At 7:25 p.m. tonight, checked the dedicated public comment line, and there are no voicemail messages that were left between the last meeting and tonight at 7:20. Comment July 8th, 2020. Dear Chairman Kurtz and the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, thank you for your work to support a healthy and well-planned community for our town of Cheshire, Connecticut. I only recently became aware of the current activities and advanced effort to actualize the development of 50 Hazel Drive. Should there be no postponement of the scheduled virtual public hearing on July 13th, 2020, I request that my comments be read into the record. My employment involves substantial daily travel with a little extra time to be aware of local matters. As a result of this and other personal matters, I am late in becoming actively aware and involved in the matter at hand and regret that I have insufficient time to present more evidentiary material. Nevertheless, I offer the following. My husband and I have been residents of 45 Lakeview Avenue since the purchase of our home on December 11th, 1980. Over the years, my husband and I have invested in improvements to our home and property, as well as maintenance and improvements to Larson Pond Dam, to which improvements were ordered by the State of Connecticut DEP Water Resources Unit. We were approached by the state within months of our home purchase after the previous owners of 50 Hazel Drive rejected responsibility for any such dam and spillway improvements. We eventually had this work performed with the required engineering studies, planning, permits, work, and inspections, all at significant personal cost. We have continued responsibilities and costs such as periodic professional inspections and assessments assigning to us on this matter. My husband and I have enjoyed, cared for, and improved our home on Lakeview Avenue. This house was built in the early 30s, and we are only the second owners of this property. We have no plans to leave this home and the property anytime in the foreseeable future. I want to present my opposition in both A, the July 13, 2020 meeting by public access was made only available through virtual live streaming on YouTube due to COVID-19 restrictions. I believe it's important and more effective that this hearing be held in person to publicly discuss these issues with the Planning and Zoning Commission members. I support a delay of the July 13th scheduling hearing until such time that this meeting can be held in person, publicly attended with open participation. Further, that no vote on this should occur until after the public hearing. Other town meetings and hearings are being held as normal. B, the zone change for 50 Hazel Drive should be denied. I oppose for the following explained reasons. Regarding the zone map change petition of Lamp Realty and the proposed 2 57-unit buildings for the total of 114 units on this multifamily residential development entitled Lakeside of Cheshire to be situated on 50 Hazel Drive, Cheshire, Connecticut. I believe the currently proposed project is too large in living units in comparison to the existing nature and character of the surrounding neighborhood, comprised of single-family homes with the exception of 2 8-unit apartment complexes and 1 apparent boarding house to the west of 50 Hazel Drive. These neighborhoods are serviced by narrow roads, little tiny narrow roads, as these parcels of the residential homes and neighborhoods were designed. When there are a couple or more cars on Hazel Drive to exit or enter Route 70 Waterbury Road intersection, people would surely drive the opposite direction of Hazel to exit 50 Hazel Drive by either Hillside or Mayview. This causing an increase of traffic, reduction of safety and privacy inherent in the small, otherwise tranquil pocket neighborhood with their short and small, quiet streets. We at Lakeview Avenue, Andrew Avenue, Larson Avenue, Hazel Drive, Hillside Avenue, Mayview Avenue, and other area streets would have the proposed large rental apartments and 2 building complexes overpowering our little neighborhoods, which is out of character for this area, and our existing family homes are likely to be depreciated in value with increased traffic impact and pressure upon the wildlife that exists here, which are not reflected in the studies which have been cited in your previous meetings, but which we as homeowners, we observe on a daily basis. For your information, throughout the year, the Larson's Pond and surrounding area is either home to or visited by various animals on a continuous or migratory basis. Unusual and usual to this area are what we've seen, including eagles, hawks, heron, loons, wild turkey, woodpeckers, owls, ducks, geese, swan, in addition to a variety of fowl, mountain lion, bobcats, coyotes, deer, bear. Aquatic wildlife includes various breed of turtles, snapper and box, frogs, snakes, beavers, and other various fish, to name a few. While the need for affordable housing in Cheshire exists, this particular location is not ideal given the expected impact to the existing neighborhoods and the surrounding narrow streets, the fragility of Larson's Pond, and the wildlife supported therein and thereon. The above are reasons that another location in Cheshire would better serve the need for affordable housing without harm to that which presently exists. A less imposing project for this area should be developed. Lastly, I understand the present condition of 50 Hazel Drive is an unsightly mess and improvement by responsible development is desirable. Our hope is that this improvement would be done in scale and in sensitivity to the existing surrounding neighborhoods and undeveloped natural areas that host a myriad of wildlife. Have environmental impact studies been performed? Please advise and provide reference if so, and advise if not. If no environmental study has been performed, I ask why not. I respectfully request your consideration of these matters and request that previous proposed projects in Cheshire be reflected upon comparing earlier denials of smaller scoped, fewer living units development projects in the town of Cheshire, traffic impact, such as Chapman property hearings in 2016, that were discussed, stating traffic patterns for 8 housing units that would be 65 to 70 trips in and out of the site daily. For 150 housing units with families, daily trip in and out would be 900 trips per day. Traffic impact, where the discussion on the amount of trips was deemed to be fewer that is expected from this 114 living units complex. We welcome development to scale with the surrounding homes and consider this to be a largely single-family owned area, where we have confidence that people that seek residence here will have the same continuing dedication and respect for their properties that most of us have here. I also ask that you seriously consider the small, narrow streets that will not be adequate to serve such a large influx of residents and related visitors, while negatively impacting those of us that reside in these long-time established small neighborhoods. Respectfully, Elizabeth York. Comments that were received at the last meeting of July 13th and not read into the record, also by Elizabeth York. There are a few comments, one being fewer units would be a better approach as to parking as well. Invariably, it's only renters, but mentioned to accommodate friends, family, visitors. What date was the traffic study performed? Asking, as traffic has been greatly reduced since early March 2020 due to state shutdown during our current pandemic. If the date of the study is listed, my apology, however, I cannot see listed on computer screens. And that was all from Elizabeth York. Comment dated July 13th, 2020, from Lynn Dawson. I moved to Cheshire in 1994. There are so many things about this town that I love. However, the one thing this town lacks is diversity, racial and socioeconomic diversity. The median home price in Cheshire is $314,000, and the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,200. Starting salaries for our police officers are about $53,000, and for our teachers, $70,000. If these professionals are also carrying student loan debt, buying or renting in Cheshire is going to be out of their financial reach. It is also out of reach for our elderly on fixed incomes and our young people just finishing school and starting their careers. We need affordable housing in this town. It will allow the people who work in this town to stay in this town. In the past few months, we have all seen the glaring inequality in this nation. The pandemic has disproportionately impacted people of color, largely due to their inability to access healthcare as a result of systematic racism, but also because they tend to be people on the front lines, the essential workers who do not have the privilege of working from home. As a person of privilege, I feel it's my duty to foster equality in my community. Providing affordable housing is one step towards that goal. Is it enough? No, but it is something, and it will cost us very little, and the benefits to Cheshire by increasing our diversity are huge. To whom much is given, much is required. Lynn Dawson. Received July 13th, 2020, from Frank Baston. If the proposed extra parking is not to be built now, how will it affect how the state DOT looks at the project? Will they have to count those parking spaces in their calculations for future traffic on Route 10? Next comment from the same individual, Frank Baston. My wife, Denise Baston, dropped off 2 petitions for the Hazel Drive project. Both petitions had the same amount of signatures. When I read in the minutes, one of the petitions was short on the counts. I have copies of both if you need to correct the counts. Frank Baston. Comments from Rochelle Crino, dated July 13th, 2020. I don't believe there's an existing sidewalk on Hazel Drive. Before making a decision, can the state be called in to study the traffic in the area? Can the size and scope of the development be reconsidered, perhaps 60% of the number of units proposed? And that's Rochelle Crino. July 13th, 2020. Comments from Dennis Fox. Kids will wait for bus on asphalt on the street intersection of Waterbury Road. The sidewalk ends 30 feet before Waterbury Road. Maybe everything is off, but not one state DOT employee has been laid off. Doesn't the state take over if this goes AHD? State would have to order it. Existing apartments at Hazel Drive have off-street. Southernmost building has parking on north side, but no one uses it. They'd have to walk around the building. And that is from Dennis Fox. Comment from Emma Fox. This is dated July 13th. Dear Planning and Zoning Commission, I've lived at 56 Lakeview Avenue with my mother, father, brother, and sister my entire life. It will be a true tragedy to see the pond I lived beside my entire life filled with trash blown in from dumpsters and thrown in by renters who have no love for the beauty of the landmark or ecosystem. It will be heartbreaking to see trees cut down, the pond polluted, and local wildlife dwindling and dying. I think of the turtles we played with as children, the swans and fish and frogs dying off until the pond is a wasteland. I think of deer, bears, foxes, and countless small animals that will flee the noise and disregard for their home and habitat. The number of parking spaces is the least of environmental concerns we should be discussing. It's disturbing to see such little regard for our pond and neighborhood shown by not only the company building on this site, but also by members of our own town who fail to ask critical questions about the effect that such a project can have on the ecosystem. As someone who was raised here within the last 2 decades, I hold a point of view that not many others share. I can attest to the unsafe nature of traffic on Waterbury Road. There was some discussion about school buses during the hearing, but I think it's important to hear the expertise of residents of the area, especially children. I spent every day from kindergarten to 10th grade waiting at the end of Lakeview Avenue to catch my bus. The number of potential accidents involving children that I've witnessed are countless. Watching cars breeze past the school bus while the school bus was stopped with lights flashing and the stop sign fully extended was a weekly, if not daily, occurrence. I have no doubt that the woman who drove my elementary school bus all 6 years that I attended Doolittle Elementary School will confirm this fact. She spent a ridiculous amount of time blaring her horn at drivers who sped increasing amounts of time staring at their phone instead of the road. I began learning to drive when I was 16 years old, and from that point on, I no longer took the school bus. Instead, I began to brave the left turn out of Lakeview Avenue myself during morning rush hour. I know 4 other students in the Lakeview, Andrew Larson area alone that will be driving within the next 2 years. This includes my sister, and I am terrified of the idea of her having to learn how to take a left-hand turn out of Lakeview Avenue as it is, let alone with 114 apartment units built just down the street. For someone to visit our neighborhood even multiple times during the time of COVID-19 pandemic does not give a true estimate of the traffic in the area, nor does it outweigh the years of experience of actual residents in the area. I understand it's impossible to satisfy everyone all the time. I merely ask that you choose to consider the consequences for this project will have on lifelong residents of your town. I ask that you make a decision with the families, children, and wildlife of the area in mind, rather than the cherry-picked statistics of business people seeking to make money at the expense of Cheshire citizens, your neighbors, friends, and the people who look to you right now to make a choice in their best interest. Respectfully, Emma Fox. Next comment is dated July 13th from Christina and Sean Gio. Dear Planning and Zoning Commissioners, we write to you as residents of Cheshire in support of the special permit application and zone change request of Lamp Realty LLC at 50 Hazel Drive. We support the expansion of housing choices in Cheshire and generally and specifically at the subject property. In the 30 years that the state of Connecticut has collected information on the number of affordable housing units available in each municipality, Cheshire's affordable housing supply has grown by only 167 homes during a period when the total housing stock in Cheshire expanded by more than 1,600 homes. 86% of Cheshire's housing supply is made up of single-family homes. Cheshire needs a greater variety of housing types affordable to households with a range of incomes. There is little question that the redevelopment of 50 Hazel Drive would improve this site. The proposed structures and site improvements constructed to standards would improve the existing drainage of stormwater into the adjacent pond and visually improve the location. It is our understanding that the site abuts a large parcel of town-owned open space that is otherwise inaccessible to Cheshire residents. We hope a modest point of access to the existing trail system could be negotiated with the developer. Thank you for your opportunity to share our concerns. Christina and Sean Gio. Received July 13th, 2020. These were email comments from Ashley Romero. Due to major traffic changes of this area, residents need a public, socially distanced meeting. The traffic report mentions sightlines. Carabetta, Costco, the small plaza, and the additional 150 vehicles will make traffic unbearable. Besides their site plan, there are additional 22 acres of land. What are the further plans for this area, and will it impact or connect to Larson or Lakeview Avenue? It is not mentioned anywhere on the agenda. We need to call prior to noon to leave comments or ask questions via phone. This does not give the public the best opportunity to participate without this restriction announced prior. This needs to be held publicly by an actual public hearing to comment and ask questions. Lack of information is unrightful. Has the plan considered the impacts of noise and vehicle pollution to the area and studied associated with the health effects of so many new cars and units? And again, those comments were Ashley Romero. Again, emailed at the July 13th meeting is a comment from Karen Schnitzer. Good evening all, thank you for this presentation. My questions about this project are these. Number one, will outdoor lighting be shielded downward? Number two, will plantings including trees, vegetative buffers, and gardens use native plants as opposed to non-native exotic species? Thank you very much, Karen Schnitzer. And two comments received July 13th, 2020 from Lulafer Vinca. Is the Cheshire Police Department prepared to respond to calls after the apartment complex is built because there will be an influx of new residents? It doesn't sound as though there's enough parking spaces, 45 spots. Where will the tenants park? That concludes the information that was sent at the meeting for July 13th. And now information that was received for tonight's meeting dated July 22nd, 2020 from Denise Baston. Dear Chairman Kurtz, I'm writing this letter in response to statements made during the July 13th, 2020 Cheshire Planning and Zoning public hearing. I respectfully request my following comments to be read into the minutes record of the public hearing scheduled for Monday, July 27th, 2020. Many of the questions and concerns we submitted to the July 13th Planning and Zoning meeting were not actually addressed or answered, but were skirted around or altogether avoided. There has been thus far no adequate resolution to any of our questions or concerns and statements made during the meeting, and have actually only served to introduce new and even more concerning questions. Traffic, still a significant safety concern. The many valid and alarming traffic concern issues brought up by concerned neighbors were not adequately addressed or resolved by any of the comments given by Dave Sullivan. He stated that a traffic study determined there would not be many new cars and little impact on the streets. This is ridiculous. It's absurd to say that 114 units would not generate many new cars. And even if that was true, it would warrant acknowledging that even a few more cars would make a notable difference. As previously addressed, traffic is already congested and dangerous along this section of Waterbury Road. In particular, it is extremely difficult and dangerous for vehicles attempting to exit from the small side street neighborhoods. Anyone lives or travels through this area knows this to be true. This has been mentioned many times before, but due to the serious nature warrants being mentioned once again. This fact should not and cannot be downplayed. Two general summations regarding traffic seem to have evolved from this meeting. Number one, the acknowledgement that the section of Waterbury Road is a congested and dangerous area, followed by the absurd statements that with the proposed 114 units, there would not be many new cars and little impact on the streets, in parentheses, Dave Sullivan. Number two, the reference of Route 70, Waterbury Road, being a state road and therefore the state's responsibility to address these traffic concerns. Included in the minutes, Mr. Sullivan commented on lots of narrative of what is happening on Route 70, Waterbury Road, and acknowledged these issues, concerns, questions will be addressed with the DOT along with suggestions for improvement. Attorney Williams stated if applications are approved by Planning and Zoning, there will be applications made to the State Office of Traffic Administration and DOT. This is wrong. How can there be any proceedings without first the involvement and input of SOTA and DOT regarding the many traffic concerns? Applications should and must be made to SOTA and DOT prior to Planning and Zoning consideration. Other points that still have not been adequately addressed. Number one, how to handle the backup of cars as they line up to exit Hazel Drive onto Waterbury Road. Where and how will they fit? Number two, the backup of cars when trying to enter side streets due to narrowness of roads and difficulty to safely accommodate two-way traffic, especially during times of school bus drop-offs and pickups. Most importantly, all of this is that almost all traffic concerns were deferred by Mr. Sullivan to the responsibility of the state and DOT. Hence, it should be blatantly obvious that the undeniable responsible decision that no further discussion take place until the SOTA and DOT studies have been taken place. Parking. Parking demand is still a huge issue. The proposed 118 parking spaces are not nearly adequate to accommodate for the 1.5 person average per unit, especially when considering that number is very unlikely due to the high cost of the units. This 1.5 person average is also unrealistic number when considering two-parent or single-family families with children. As well, 188 parking spaces will not account for the high likelihood of rent sharing for 20-something age group, and a desire to move out of their own, but unable to afford those rents. It's likely we could see them group up in 3 or 4 in a unit to cover costs. In addition, there is absolutely no accommodation for guest parking and no option for roadside parking, as it would be prohibited. This is cause for viable concern brought up by Planning and Zoning member Mr. Natale and shared by others. This development proposal needs to be reviewed for the potential of 228 parking spaces when considering approval and not the 183 parking spaces being proposed. If the additional 45 spaces end up being needed, and let's be real, that would most likely be the case, it would significantly alter the impact to the wetlands and therefore absolutely must be considered as being the case before an approval can even be contemplated. Sidewalks. per Mr. Volker, under section 44A 8-7D, they cannot require sidewalks on Hazel Drive. For a subdivision, the commission cannot require the developer to install sidewalks on town roads. The fact that the commission cannot require the developer to install sidewalks on town roads does not release them from the moral responsibility to do what is within their power to protect the safety of the children and people from accident, injury, and death. They can and must consider the fact that children will not be able to safely navigate to the bus stop. The one sidewalk on Hazel Drive referred to during the meeting is minimal to say the least and ends 160 feet shy of the sight line, and an additional 11 feet would need to be added to reach the top of the street. As well, there's no off-road area for children to safely wait for the school bus. This has not been well thought out in regard to the safety of the children. In reference to the comment that the apartments would be conveniently located and within walking distance to the Connecticut Transit bus line, this also is a misrepresentation when you consider the hazardous nature of the 2/10 mile walk with no sidewalks and the need to cross the very busy and dangerous Route 10 to get to the commuter lot bus stop. Water safety. Let's also consider safety issues in regards to the pond and comments regarding water access. The commission was told by Mr. McAvoy that there is limited pond access through the trail along the edge. There's a 4-foot drop. It is not conducive to just walk down to the pond, and it's not intended for anything formal in that area. Number one, limited pond access means there is access. If there is access, people will go. That is a foregone conclusion. Number two, it is only a slight drop, easily accessible and not at all prohibitive. People, of course, will make their own way down to fish, to use boats, to skate, or walk on the ice and to explore. Will they be safe? How many children will make their way down there? Will we see drownings or near drownings? How many? Will we see falls through the ice as a result of ice safety ignorance? All of these scenarios are more likely. In the early 90s, when the convalescent home was operational, my husband and I were awakened in the middle of the night by flashing emergency lights. The Cheshire Fire Department was accessing the pond via our backyard in order to execute a water search for a missing convalescent home resident. Ours was not the only water search mission to occur during that time period, as other neighbors' properties were used on more than one occasion for access. So again, where is the concern for the safety of the people, especially children? Who will be responsible, Lamp Realty, or ultimately those making decisions today in these meetings? Environmental constraints, noise, traffic, preservation of ecology. Site design in reference to site form, boundaries, conditions, and neighboring properties. As mentioned before, the construction of these proposed multi-story units would cause a dramatic and detrimental effect on the neighboring owners' properties. Comments made by Mr. Williams referenced that the Lakeview Nursing Home had a greater building coverage than what's proposed for the new project. This comment is misleading when you take into account the mammoth increase of unit heights. The proposed towers are 4 stories in back with a pitched roof, accounting for an additional 10.5 feet. This is pondside and in direct view of the Lakeview waterfront residents. Per Mr. Williams, the design is thoughtful, is sensitive to site constraints. To make this comment show complete disregard for the conditions of neighboring properties and how this would affect the quality of life for those residing there. We would be forced to endure loss of privacy, 228 windows facing us, massive increase of noise, magnified and carried by the water, by hundreds of people coming and going at all times, as well as hundreds of vehicles coming and going at all times. In the early 90s, when the convalescent home was operational, my husband and I were often startled awake in the night by voices that seemed to be right in the room with us. The source, just a few convalescent home staff members taking their 2 a.m. break. Their conversation carried over the pond through our open window as clear as if they were in the room with us. I can't begin to process how invasive and overwhelming this would feel when you contemplate that number inflated from just a few to hundreds. Let me close once again on a personal note regarding how devastating this would be, especially for me, for those of us pondside. What would our new reality be if this went through? No more privacy, I mean at all. 228 windows facing us and parking lots filled with hundreds of vehicles coming and going at all times. There would be a loss of trees and shrubs, resulting in the loss of our beautiful view, noise buffer, and habitat for the wildlife we love. Our losses would even reach to the sky. If this 4-story gargantuan building, twice the height of what was there previously, are built We would not only lose all the precious things that we already mentioned, we would also lose our view of the sunset. Every bit of beauty would be abolished, nothing lovely left, only the towering monsters of the mammoth building units, out of place and unwanted. Respectfully, Denise Baston and family. Comment received from Tess Baston, dated July 22nd. Dear Chairman Kurtz, I'm writing to you with concern over the Hazel Drive apartment building. My family and I have several concerns regarding this project, which result in our being opposed to the zone change that would allow the owners, developers to construct 114 apartments on this property. Some of the reasons I oppose this project are as follows. Traffic. The increase of traffic, in addition to the already high volume of traffic we have in our area, will be extremely dangerous and inconvenient. The surrounding neighborhood roads are very small, resulting in barely enough room for 2 cars at one time and school buses not being able to come down the streets, never mind the volume of cars 114 apartment units and the proposed 183 spots will bring. Route 70's traffic is already extremely busy and chaotic, causing safety concerns on a daily basis. I have spent 5+ minutes waiting to pull out of my street before. Once one of my neighbors had to literally step in and stand in traffic to let me out after waiting for a good 10 minutes to pull out into the road. Our neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods are full of children, elderly people, and pets. The traffic already causes a threat to our safety, even a simple walk throughout the neighborhood. Adding more vehicles to our day-to-day life and commute will bring added frustration, danger, and an altogether negative impact to this community. Wildlife. I've lived on Lakeview Avenue for my entire 25 years of life and have had the great pleasure of watching nature and wildlife thrive in our woods and in our pond. The amount of traffic and population this project intends to bring to this property and surrounding properties will be detrimental to the quality of life for the surrounding wildlife. Having over 200 people living quite literally in the woods and on top of the pond presents so much opportunity for waste, littering, and poor care of the homes and our precious wildlife. Privacy. With living directly next to the pond and the woods, this proposed project of 114 towering apartments will absolutely destroy any sliver of privacy we have in our home now. These apartments are directly across the pond from us, and we have a direct view into our backyard, back deck, bedroom windows. If this project were to come to pass, we would lose the privilege of simply being comfortable in the privacy of our backyard, side yard, and even our bedrooms facing the pond side. With 114 towering apartments being put in place, not only do we lose our privacy, we lose our peace. The sounds that travel are amplified by the pond and often sound like they are less than a few feet away from us. A few neighbors from across the pond on Hazel Drive can be heard with ease from our backyard. Imagine 114 apartments and 228 or more people having conversations, yelling, playing music, coming and going all day. Imagine how much noisier our lives would get. Not only will we have zero privacy, we will also get to hear every noise made in those 114 apartments. They might as well camp out in our backyard at that point. I understand that in your view, all you see is a project to make money, an investment that you hope will pay off in the end. But if you would please take a moment to switch your view to ours, you would see that in our view, all we see is an end to our lives and our homes as we know it, as for some of us have known for over 30 years. Respectfully, Tess Baston. Next is a comment from Linda Batsa, received July 22nd. Dear Chairman Kurtz, while reading over the minutes from the July 13 meeting, I found I have 2 questions and comments that still need to be addressed. From the minutes, Attorney Williams cited why Hazel Drive is a good location for multifamily housing. One of the reasons was property is within walking distance to the Connecticut Transit bus line. That's true. However, that 2/10 mile walk distance is quite hazardous. Starting at the south exit entrance from the complex, you cross over to the sidewalk on the other side of the street. You then have 67 feet of sidewalk left to walk on. After that, there are 197 feet with no sidewalk on the side of a narrow road to the stop sign at Waterbury Road. Once you're there, you'll need to cross the 3rd most dangerous road in Cheshire. To continue to the bus stop, you have to walk 0.15 miles on the side of Waterbury Road with no sidewalks and a daily average of 11,119 vehicles traveling at 45.6 miles per hour. How can you state that this is a good reason for this location? It was also noted that 2/3 of the community responders to the survey stated support of moderately priced housing. Please advise where, when, and to whom the survey was sent. Is there a copy of this survey available? Did the survey address that a 114 apartment complex was the type of housing unit proposed? Was the survey sent to residents surrounding Hazel Drive? I live at 105 Lakeview Avenue, and I never heard or have seen any survey. The plan asks the Commission to defer 45 parking spaces, which is permitted under the regulations. The plan complies with the regulations and shows where these spaces could be built, and 2 spaces per dwelling unit is not necessary. That is apparently a quote from Attorney Williams, according to the author. How do you determine that 2 spaces per dwelling unit is not necessary? According to a February study by Experian Automotive, which specializes in collecting and analyzing automotive data, Americans own an average of 2.28 vehicles per household, and more than 35% of households own 3 or more cars. And what about visitors, repairmen, delivery people? Where would they park? Site design. The site is thoughtful. As Ann Belcher stated in the Record Journal, July 18, 2020 edition, for example, in Cheshire, you don't want to have high-rises, you want to have something that fits into what this town is, Belcher said. It's not a city, it's a town. A 4-story building pondside does not fit within single-family homes. This building not only takes away from our ability to see the sunset, but also invades our privacy. Mr. Stroller raised a question on the affordable housing unit rents. He cited the $54,000 income level, 1 or 2 person income, $2,400 monthly rent for a 2-bedroom unit as not being affordable, accessible, and not comfortable for most people, as such a high rent pushing out of the average working family of 4. He also asked about units for senior citizens, people over age 65. I agree with Mr. Strollo and would also comment, like most senior citizens could not afford to live there. I'm a senior and I could not afford to live there. Mr. McAvoy said sidewalks are provided. There is a link between the buildings. There are sidewalks on Hazel Drive on the opposite side that can be a crosswalk to get to the existing sidewalk. This will be reviewed by the local traffic authority. Sidewalks on opposite side are only 117 feet. There's an additional 186 feet to Waterbury Road with no sidewalks. The Commission was informed by Mr. Volker that under Section 44A 8-7D, they cannot require sidewalks on Hazel Drive, but they can be required on private property improvements. For a subdivision, the Commission cannot require the developer to install sidewalks on town roads. So who can require them? So do we let pedestrians fend for themselves? Also noted in the minutes, there is limited pond access through the trail along the edge. There is a 4-foot drop. It is not conducive to just walk around the pond. It's not intended for anything formal in that area. It may not be conducive to just walk around the pond, but what about safety issues? How do you stop people from still trying to get to the pond or falling into the pond? The architectural plans and rendering of the west facade faces Hazel Drive and is 3 stories, and the buildings are built into the site. The rear shows 4-story elevation. FTA pitched roof is used for more residential characteristics. The roof is pitched around 4 to 5 and 12, which means it adds up to 10.5 feet to the 3rd story. And this will add 10.5 feet to the 4-story rear. Then added, the center portion of the building is about 4 feet higher than the balance of the building. Now we have a high rise. How does it fit? Is this thoughtful? Traffic report study. Responses to the comments. This has been addressed and explained, and the number of parking spaces in the development does not generate traffic. This implies that some cars just stay parked and never venture out. Not likely. School buses. The Board of Ed Transportation Department advises that students from Hazel Drive would be picked up on Waterbury Road. There is a sidewalk in poor condition that will be cleaned up. A crosswalk will be installed with appropriate signage for student safety and bus pickup. That sidewalk is only 117 feet long, of which 50 feet is north of the south exit entrance from the complex, leaving only 67 feet of sidewalk and 197 feet left to travel with no sidewalks to Waterbury Road. Regarding parking spaces per DU, Mr. Natale stated his strong support for 1-bedroom units having 2 spaces. He has visited the site many times and said the sidewalk is used for overflow parking, sight lines, and where sight lines come from. I agree with Mr. Natali, and also want to add that in winter we have to have snow and will further hamper parking and sight lines. It was pointed out by Mr. Sullivan that the state of Connecticut DOT is responsible for sightline clearing in the area of Hazel Drive, and this will be discussed with the DOT application is approved. All traffic-related issues should and must be addressed before the application is approved. This is a case of putting the cart before the horse. How can you possibly say that this project is good for Cheshire before you honestly review and scrutinize all the huge safety issues? Attorney Williams stated that 2 other apartments in the area were built in 1963, are light on parking. In 1963, there were far less cars per family. In fact, the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy states that in 1963, there were 438.75 vehicles per 1,000 people. As I've stated in my other letter, I see no use for a project of this size in this location. However, more importantly, I'm completely disappointed in the way this entire issue is being handled. There only seems to be a desire to push this project with no consideration for or interest in what effect it may have on current residents or the future residents this project may bring. And that is signed Linda Batza. Comment received July 25th, 2020 from Orlena Blacker. It starts off, number 1. I wish you would appreciate the fact it may be legal to have these virtual meetings and let the public send in comments via email or voicemail, but having a virtual meeting just because you can doesn't mean you should. In order to facilitate a more productive and active discussion, which allows for an actual dialogue between the public and the builders, an in-person and socially distanced meeting is needed. Otherwise, we are simply limited to a one question and done approach. An in-person socially distanced meeting would allow for this conversation rather than one side having full control over questions and comments. Furthermore, people who are not computer literate or do not have access to computer nor internet cannot access this public hearing. Having a virtual meeting creates an implicit bias and does not allow for some members of the public to join. Number 2, traffic sightlines by traffic experts were optimistic. The road has an arc and you need to be at the shoulder stripe to see any distance. Traffic in March 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic was less than normal when the sightlines were evaluated due to more people working from home and businesses being closed. This March, there was also less snow. This evaluation does not take into consideration snow piles in winter nor the growth of weeds in summer, which can block the sightlines. Number 3, has a traffic expert evaluated the speed or traffic? The police could sit and write speeding tickets all day long, but the people driving 50 to 60 miles per hour is common and frequent on this road. This comes from my observation and experience of living here for 50 years. Number 4, the traffic expert who works for Lamp Realty did not seem convinced of his evaluation's reliability. This zoning change should be tabled until the state of Connecticut evaluates the traffic issue concerning Route 70 as it's a state road. Number 5, these 2 buildings are behemoths compared to the surrounding structures. It does not complement the neighborhood, no matter how residential the architecture design may be considered by the builders. It will be an eyesore for the neighbors, considering for the neighbors currently living near the lake who have to pay extra taxes simply for living near the water. These massive buildings will destroy the peace and tranquility of the area. I wonder if the builder's architect actually lived here and not in Stamford or Guilford, if they would want this massive structure part of their neighborhood views. I think most certainly not. Number 6, whatever sidewalks are included in the plan and inadequate for children to wait for school buses. There is no proper area for children to wait for the school bus next to the busy road. It is also a dangerous area for city and school buses because of the stopping point is out of the sight lines of drivers coming from behind on the road where drivers speed frequently. Number 7, there's barely enough parking for residents, but there is little parking for visitors and no street parking. Thank you for reading my email, Francis Blacker. Next comment was received at the July 13th meeting. There was a comment from Gary Carter. Chairman Kurtz, I'm sure that the stormwater detention and treatment facilities will comply with any and all requirements of the planning and zoning as well as inland wetlands. However, it's my understanding that one area of constant concern is future maintenance of the stormwater facilities. Will the future accountability of the ongoing maintenance of the stormwater facilities be by the owner or the developer? Will there be caveats on the drawings and within the plans, particularly the stormwater plan, that require future upkeep as well as annual reports with regard to discharge water quality and verification of maintenance? To fully protect Larson's Pond, accountability for ongoing maintenance or the stormwater treatment facilities for stormwater treatment and stormwater detention should be a condition of approval if the development were allowed to proceed in any form. Ensuring that future accountability for maintenance of the stormwater treatment facilities as well as ongoing requirement for documentation showing that the performance of required maintenance has occurred should be captured now as part of the approval process. Hopefully this will minimize the possibility of 1, damage to the integrity of the pond as a result of failures within the stormwater treatment and detention systems, and 2, the town of Cheshire being blindsided by problems resulting from failure to properly maintain the stormwater facilities. I may not have presented this well, but hopefully your experience in this area will allow you to capture the idea and incorporate it into your deliberations. I thank you for your consideration. Gary L. Carter. On July 23rd, another comment from Gary Carter. Chairman Kurtz, I've had the opportunity to view the document titled Cover Page 64-50 Hazel Drive 1. The document provides information relative to the development, and I note that there is a section that provides information relative to the post-construction operation and maintenance plan. I note that the concerns I noted are addressed and that there appears to be sufficient record-keeping requirements to monitor compliance. I also note that the document states that the maintenance of the driveway and stormwater management system will be the responsibility of the owner, identified as Lamp Realty. Hopefully that verbiage will suffice to transfer to all and any subsequent owners of the property. Thank you, Gary L. Carter. Received July 23rd. Additional comments from Gary Carter. Dear Chairman Kurtz, I request that the following comments and questions, as well as the responses to the questions, be read into the record of the special meeting public hearing to be held on July 27, 2020. The following questions relate to the questions from Commissioner Natale and the responses from the applicant. Questions PDF, page 1. First question regarding input from Connecticut DOT regarding potential additional traffic due to 114 units, 228 parking spaces. Responses, PDF, page 2. Response is that the changes to the Waterbury Road, if any, would be the result of the review by the Connecticut DOT as part of the Office of the State Traffic Administration process, which will take place after the Planning and Zoning review, if approved. Questions. Is this the standard sequence of events, Planning and Zoning concluding deliberations and reaching decisions prior to the state reviews? Would the Planning and Zoning Commissioners not benefit from knowledge of the results of the State of Connecticut reviews in their consideration of the application? Please have the applicant provide an explanation of the last sentence beginning. As parts of the process, we will also work with Cheshire's local traffic authority. That is not understandable to the average reader. Questions PDF, page 1, second question regarding the traffic study is not clear. There is a lot of verbiage within the response. However, there is no clear, concise answer to the 2 questions posed. The direct question, is the study indicating that the 50-foot LOS is being met? An implied question as to whether or not the questioner understanding that the standard for the measuring sight line is from the line of the road at the stop sign is a correct understanding. What are the answers to the 2 questions? Questions PDF, page 1, third paragraph. The traffic study states that Waterbury Road is 2 lanes. The response is that these conditions are not ideal, however, they are existing conditions. If the conditions are not ideal prior to the approval of the application with the 228 parking space requirement, a requirement does not appear to account for guests and/or service providers, school buses, and occasional emergency vehicles. What will the conditions deteriorate to after such an approval? How does this acknowledgement factor into the deliberations of the Planning and Zoning Commission and the result stipulation requirements, particularly relative to the additional traffic generated by tenants, guests, service providers, and occasional emergency vehicles? Questions PDF page 2, first paragraph. The developer is proposing having 183 parking spaces. The response indicates the use of statistical data published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Is this statistical data available on a regionalized or more focused basis? If the data is available by region or by more focused basis, is one such basis specific to our area region? If so, was the data specific to this town, to this area, town, county, etc.? What is the name of the table used for the analysis reflected within the current application? Questions PDF page 2, second paragraph. The minimum number of parking spaces. The response does not answer the question, is the applicant seeking a waiver? Is the applicant seeking a waiver? Will the applicant be required to take any and all steps necessary to accommodate 228 spaces in the future should such a need develop as part of their current construction activities? How will parking for guests and service providers be addressed? The following questions relate to comments made in my letter to the Commission dated July 9th, 2020. The Lakeside development was discussed during the April 24th, 2020 meeting of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission. A representative for the development explained the use of the standard residential development flow calculations of 206 GPD per unit, which equates to 23,484 GPD. It was further noted that in the discussions with the town engineer, Mr. Walter Gankars, it was thought to be appropriate to consider a different calculation because the vast majority would be small units. Mr. McAvoy noted that the 96 of the 114 units will be smaller and that the average sewage generation will be below standard of 206 GDP. The expected sewage generation for Lakeside 50 Hazel Drive was reduced from 23,484 GPD to 12,005 GPD. There was no additional support for the sharp reduction in expected sewage generation. During the meeting, there were no discussions about sewer capacity, concerns about sewer flow within the cited calculations, references to critical 8-inch sewer pipe on Waterbury Road, the additional capacity that the 8-inch sewer pipe and the potential impact if the sewer flows are underestimated, etc. In my July 9th letter, I questioned the reasonableness of such a change, especially given the move toward working at home that is projected to be a permanent change, schooling at home, social distancing, etc. It seems reasonable to assume that this will lead to increased sewer flows as well as increased water use. I would submit that the water usage and sewer flow apartment-like structures will increase as a result of more time at home for the tenants and increased intensive cleaning of public shared spaces, and that the increases will be permanent. Interestingly, during the June 24th, 2020 IWWC, Mr. Gankars delivered the superintendent's report, within which he noted, with many people working from home due to COVID-19, the wastewater flows have increased during the day and stay up. Regional Water Authority is seeing the same with increased water usage. Question: will Planning and Zoning look at the reasonableness of the estimated sewage flows? The superintendent's report to the IWWC indicates an increase in wastewater flows and notes a similar increase in water usage. Regional Water Authority has reported a 60% increase in water usage. The following questions relate to the minutes of the July 13th public hearing. Page 10, regarding eastern portion of the site. Question: are there any plans for future development of the eastern portion of the site? Is there the potential for future development of the eastern portion of the site? Page 12, Mr. McAvoy states, more spaces could be added, but the applicant wants to limit unnecessary parking spaces and demonstrate that they are not necessary at the start of development, emphasis added. This leaves in place the potential for additional spaces. Question: what would be the impact upon the construction activity for the development if the 228 spaces were provided during this current construction phase? Would there be a need for additional site protections and/or modifications? Page 12, Mr. McAvoy states, with the parking areas, will there be a slight increase in runoff? Question, what is the projected amount of increased runoff in total gallons as a percentage of the current runoff amounts? I would like to make the following comments. With any new development, there's an opportunity to do things better. There is an issue of design change in the response of what we learned so far during the current pandemic. We are also seeing the benefit of space as we spend more time in our residences. We are seeing the need to rethink how common spaces are used and maintained. For example, in multi-unit buildings, we are seeing the need for treatment of air circulated by HVAC units to combat the spread of germs and viruses. There's a need for a dedicated office study space and resultant electrical and electronic infrastructure to support working and studying from home. This then translates into the need to improve various infrastructures, i.e. our sewer and water systems, roads, emergency services, etc., to properly service life in the new reality. This is a difficult environment for you as commissioners. You have to balance the needs of the citizens who you have chosen to represent and serve against the desires of, and in this case, developers. More often than not, there is a need to just strike a proper balance. If this case is to provide the citizens, future and current residents of the subject area with quality of life and attractive, affordable housing units. On the other side, the developer's goal is to maximize profit within the operating parameters required within the town. You are in the middle and must try and strike a proper balance. And your charge is more difficult by the need to think into the future, as the decision must survive the passage of time. Accordingly, there is a need for forceful enforcement of the regulations, requirements, stipulations in place to ensure that any deviation from standard practices and requirements are stringently vetted. At the end of the day, if you achieve your goal, you will make a very strong contribution to the viability of Cheshire well into the future, and in fact, the ongoing success and profitability of any new developments. There are times when the cost of additional time and investment pay huge dividends into the future. This is one of those times. We are now seeing the considerable value in space. People are beginning to abandon urban areas and multi-unit housing. We are on the cusp of change. We should take the time to consider the changing landscapes and implement as much of the new reality into the design and construction of upcoming developments. I believe this is critical to the development as well as the future of the town of Cheshire. Table the application for now and help all parties develop the proper development for this location, which we know now supports the contention that it's not just that this is not the proper development. Consideration of the need for space, proper sewage, and the water facilities due to current and expected increases in demand, and the need for more stringent sanitation efforts needs to be properly reflected in the design. Times, and as a result, needs are changing. I thank you for your consideration. Gary Carter. Next comment, this is also from Gary Carter, received today. Dated July 27th, I read some of the comments submitted that relate to my zone map change petition and special permit application. After reading them, I'm compelled to communicate with you further relative to this application. I was pleased to see that the majority of the comments spoke to the particular comment I made in the letter to Chairman Kurtz on July 9th. I noted as follows. Among all of the verbiage, statistics, and data are two critical items that I believe deserve significant consideration in your deliberation. Page 2, Section 2.3 of the document titled Need for Affordable Housing Memo with Exhibits Part 1 noted that Central Naugatuck Valley Regional Plan of Conservation and Development 2008 recommends promoting the construction of decent, attractive, and affordable housing options. It further notes another recommendation is to combat the stigma of affordable housing by requiring quality and attractive affordable housing units. Why do I feel they are critical? Because they strike to the core of what is needed. The population that would benefit from this requirement are looking to obtain what attracted us to our neighborhood: space, tranquility, safety, etc. They are not looking to duplicate the conditions they seek to escape from. In my opinion, the majority of the comments, statements, questions, etc. of those that you heard from those seeking to preserve the character of the neighborhood, they want to preserve the character for both themselves and the potential tenants of the proposed developments. Their concern about traffic speaks to the desire for safety both for adults and children and the impact of pollution, both air and the potential impact upon the wetlands. Both reasonable concerns for current and future residents. The concerns about the relative increase in density associated with the development is also a reasonable concern, a serious concern for all of us during the current pandemic. We have read and heard news accounts of people, at least those with the means to do so, who are leaving their multi-unit housing units for lower density housing. The comments about the woods, pond, and wetlands recognize their value to mental health and well-being, providing an island of calm in an otherwise stressful world. The insertion of a large concrete environment seriously disturbs the current environment. In addition to the potential for creating a pandemic hotspot, the insertion will immediately create a heat sink, counteracting the cooling effect of the foliage it will displace. There is proposed landscaping, but not enough to offset the negative effects of the parking lot and building structure. There were comments relative to children, but again, this is relative to the dangers presented by significant traffic on less than adequate roads and the requirement for children to wait for a school bus on a busy major road and the lack of suitable sidewalks. We are concerned for the safety of our children, our neighbors' children, and the children of the potential occupants of the development. There were comments about the potential impact of an increase in the children attending schools, but it appears to me that such comments were spurred by the reference to decreased school enrollment within the documents submitted by the applicant. I will note that there is a degree of skepticism regarding the current process. However, when one considers a public statement, including that developments generate approximately 6 trips per day for a total of 900 trips, and then state that the proposed Hazel Drive development will generate a considerable less amount of number of trips, 50, one can understand the level of concern. Consider the IWWC committee minutes indicating that the standard calculation that generates an estimate of 23,448 gallons per day for development at 50 Hazel Drive was changed to a calculation that generated an estimate of 12,005 gallons per day. Apparently, there was a discussion between a representative of the applicant and a representative of the town, and they decided that a change should be made because the units would be smaller. Perhaps the commission, applicant, and citizens can work together to improve this application along the lines I suggest. That's from Gary Carter. Next comment, dated July 23rd, from Robin Eman. Honorable members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I will start by saying I am adamantly opposed to the zone change and massive project at 50 Hazel Drive. I would like my comments to be read into the record and become part of the minutes for this meeting. I'm requesting that the zone change be denied and that these meetings remain open for the purpose of evidentiary hearings. Parking. There should be no exceptions or exemptions from the mandatory quantity of parking per residence. As a matter of fact, since the police chief has already stated there will be no on-street parking, where is the visitor parking on this site? I believe that the applicant should go back to the Inland Wetlands Commission. By putting the mandated amount of parking and the applicant's team explained where the additional parking will go, this makes it a major issue, as that parking area would entail excavation, retaining walls, encroaching into the guidelines and setbacks to the water, and again, no visitor parking. Traffic. Addressing statements from the July 13th zoning meeting, the police department reports stating their concerns about the 2 lanes at the end of Hazel Drive and that the traffic uses the emergency breakdown lane to continue the lane up to Byam. They stated that state DOT must weigh in on this issue. Members of the zoning committee, along with residents, voiced their concerns about the sightline entries to Waterbury Road. The sightlines in the winter are much worse than ever than the other 3 seasons. Being on the mountain, snowy winters get fairly deep here. I live in the house between Lakeview and Hazel Drive. We have had upwards of 6 to 7 foot snow banks from I-84 westbound ramp up to Hazel Drive because of the multiple lanes. We put a convex mirror on a post in the snowbank so we can safely exit our driveway. Mind you, our driveway is on a flat plane. Hazel Drive is far steeper upgrade hill, which makes visibility and traction even worse. I see the state just came up and trimmed the sight lines. I am certain at the request of someone because it only gets trimmed by request or if you're lucky once a season. Attorney Williams stated the nursing home had 210 residents with a large staff, but the fact is that the 210 residents were not mobile. Very few went outside and none had vehicles. The workers had visitors at the most 50 to 60 vehicles per shift. Since that time, more traffic was added to the area with the changes of I-84 and the added stores in Waterbury. Also, rush hour is from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. Cheshire Industrial Park gets out at 3 p.m. and traffic going into Woolkett and Waterbury gets heavy at that time. The applicant states that this is a transition area. That is not true. This is a single-family owner-occupied residential area with very few commercial businesses that are grandfathered in because they were built prior to zoning regulations. There are no commercial businesses in this section of Cheshire that were built after the enactment of zoning regulations in 1970. The applicant states that it is convenient to use the transit bus. The area is rated non-walkable, car dependent. There are no sidewalks and no crosswalks to the bus stops on the road that travel at times upward of 45 miles per hour. I'm asking this application be put on hold until the State Traffic Division and DOT weigh in on these issues, and that 228 parking spaces along with ample visitor parking be included in all applications. The pond. The applicant's team claims that the pond is not easily accessible from the property with a 4-foot drop. This is not factual. Yes, there may be a couple of spots that have more of a drop-off, but we've lived on that pond for 32 years and have witnessed the banks when they were properly maintained. People not only fish off the gradual banks, but also have brought boats in through the property. When the nursing home was open, the Cheshire Fire Department came to our home a couple of occasions asking to use our boat to search the pond for missing patients. Now the applicant wants to rent to families with children. This is a recipe for disaster. The previous approval was age-restricted, owner-occupied, which is a much safer scenario. Again, I will ask, who will be responsible if a child gets hurt or worse, drowns in the pond? Who is responsible if the renters use boats on the pond and enter neighbor properties from the waterway? There will be much less of a chance of these issues with owner-occupied residents. The buildings. These buildings are massive. Adding another floor, a pitched roof, and a center lobby tower, which will add an additional 30 to 35 feet conservatively to the existing building height. On the pond side, the building will be approximately 65 to 75 feet tall. This is a building that belongs in a city or a commercial area, not in a quaint residential neighborhood. I ask that this application be denied and that only owner-occupied residents be built on this property, whether it be already age-approved restricted condos or a small cluster home development. Zoning has already worked to make this property buildable. This zoning change is not conducive with this neighborhood of owner-occupied single-family homes. I'm asking the Zoning Commission to please provide answers to my questions from the previous letter and this email, and take my requests and information into consideration. Your work is difficult and greatly appreciated. That's Robin Emon. July 23rd, from Stanley Emon. Honorable members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I would like to thank the Zoning Commission for their time. I request that my comments be read into the minutes and put on the record. I request that the meetings remain open for the purpose of evidentiary hearings. I ask that the zone change be denied. Having this second zoning change put on the table suggests that the first change was just a waste of time and did not go far enough for the profits for the applicant. Say nothing for the time that the taxpayers wasted that worked on the agreement to satisfy all parties at hand. There was give and take, and an agreement was made between the applicant, the town, and the neighbors. The first zone change was good and should stand. May I suggest that if the town needs a project of this magnitude, that it be put in an area that safety is much less of a factor. Keep in mind the first fatality, perhaps a person in a vehicle, motorcycle, a child at a bus stop, or drowning in the pond, may be a life-altering nightmare that stays with you the rest of your life. With this in mind, I would not want to be in any of your shoes because an accident will come. The bad dreams will depend on the makeup of your soul. The project is a life-altering decision for the residents of this area and the panel that must vote this crazy agenda up or down. I ask you to take this matter at hand very, very seriously. Question: Why wasn't the text of the reports from the police and fire department put into the last meeting minutes? Why doesn't the applicant have to start with the state traffic and DOT level first for approval? This seems to be going backwards. When the applicant did their traffic study, were all three street traffic coming in and out calculated all together, or did they have numbers for each street individually? The traffic study engineer said that the visibility study was taken from the emergency breakdown lane, not the stop line. When pulling out of the road, if a vehicle gets hit at which line they are, then who is at fault? Did the traffic study take into consideration that the emergency lane is used daily to continue the 2 lanes up to the light? If the law requires 228 parking spaces and there is no visitor parking included, it was passed through inland wetlands with much less. Then why is zoning even taking this application into consideration until it is sent back to inland wetlands with the mandated numbers? If this project is passed, in the water runoff, how will it be protected? Will there be cleaning and servicing program attached to this forever? How often will it be cleaned and serviced, or not at all? If the residents find a significant loss in property values, will the town then lower our tax base? What on completion is the annual tax of this project? Are there tax exemptions? What is the average sized Cheshire home tax? Do either cover 2 children per school system? Is there a plan to make a safe bus stop for those children that are now existing and the massive overload from the amount of children from the 114 units? If we can only save 1 child. This is an agenda. Safety is a huge problem. Please think of the future. Do not let this project burden your soul. Thank you for the job that you all do. I admit I could not do it. May God bless you all. Respectfully, Stanley Emon Jr. Comments received today, July 27th. Dear Planning and Zoning, we would like to give you a list of reasons why the Hazel Drive building project must be stopped. This should be addressed when public meetings are open again, not shoved through during a pandemic and residents cannot attend real meetings with our voices to be heard. We live on 50 Hillside Avenue and our property is directly within our backyard. There are just a few reasons that we totally oppose this. Number 1, major traffic danger. Number 2, this is a quiet residential cul-de-sac neighborhood. There are no sidewalks and very narrow roads. Number 4, dangerous for children and all pedestrians on Hazel Drive and Route 70 Waterbury Road. 5, school and town services are limited, especially because of COVID-19 restrictions. Route 70, dangerous for school buses already. Number 6, nature and wildlife disruptive. We have swans, herons, egrets, owls, wild turkeys, turtles, multiple variety of birds, foxes, coyote, bobcats, deer, bears, and moose. This area is mostly Cheshire City water property. Number 7, property value will decrease and we all lose privacy. Number 8, this is a small residential neighborhood. This huge project is out of place for this area. It's a huge project that should go on 691 area that is already zoned multi-purpose. Number 9, Waterbury Road is very busy and dangerous. Adding 200 plus cars will be a nightmare. They will use our streets to exit and enter, which they will remove peace and safety from the current residents. Number 10, the pond is dangerous for children and was struck by lightning many times, even recently. Number 11, this will disturb our peace as the pond carries sound on both sides. For all those who have the power to approve or disapprove this project, please consider Cheshire a quiet and quaint town and let us keep it that way. What if this was going to be built in front of your house? Then how would you vote? Sincerely, Lily and Charlie Kendrick. And the last communication, titled Opposition to Hazel Drive Development. On Monday, June 13th, I was able to observe a Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for the Hazel Drive development proposal. I saw a rare combination of desperation and foolishness. 114 plus more cars will not help the dangerous and congested traffic on Waterbury Road. I had a little trouble following the algorithm or formula to calculate monthly rents of $1,200 to $1,500 for studio or 1-bedroom apartments and $2,400 for apartments with 2 bedrooms. These apartments were recommended for teachers, police, and firefighters. Teachers have expectations, 6-figure student loan debt, and long commutes from Tallinn and Durham. I hear well-founded concern about children's safety and sidewalks. Waterbury Road will need speed bumps, but the exception of children in the building does not explain the 1.5 person occupancy in the studio apartments. As a former single parent, promoting single parent households is an irrational choice. Proposing overpriced, undersized apartment living offering little more than inconvenient access to Interstate 84 exit 26 is also an irrational choice. The residents not killed by COVID-19 and traffic accidents will still have to get past the bears. Anyone with marketable skills will be looking for more, for their housing dollars to go elsewhere. After hearing the Planning and Zoning Commission on Monday night, I am less worried about the crowding and more worried about the cost of 2 vacant buildings and the subsequent consequence of failed real estate development. The Cheshire school system is burdened with the cost of adding safety measures and encouraged to reopen next month in August. Only remote learning makes sense until COVID-19 testing and effective vaccines are in place and available. Southern states such as Texas, Florida, and Louisiana opened early. They're having problems we don't need. Sincerely, Mike Caitlin. And that is it for comments.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Great
Welcome.
job. Comments. So with that, I guess we'll go to Mr. Williams for some testimony and answer some of these questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. I want to start off by saying that in the last 2 weeks, I think you have seen that our team has worked hard to try to respond to all the requested comments that we had received through the first night of hearing and then through the last couple of weeks. And by this past Friday, we submitted multiple documents responding to all of the questions and comments from commissioners, town staff, and the public, and you have those. And we believe we've more than adequately addressed every issue that has come up. I would note that we've gone out of our way to communicate with our neighbors and to respond to them. Lamp Realty has tried to be a responsible neighbor and to listen to all the comments. We have on numerous occasions reached out to our neighbors looking for constructive comments. Even during this hearing a few days ago, I emailed folks in the area and asked them if they wanted us to spend more time on any certain issue or would like us to address a particular question. And our team, I believe, has responded on every question that's been raised by commission members as well, with the exception of one that we will provide an additional answer on for you tonight. And tonight you will hear first from Dave Sullivan, who just has a few things. Then John Cruitt, our architect, to answer the one question. And then Ryan McAvoy, who will take a little more time to go over the variety of memos and additional responsive information that we have submitted. And then, Mr. Chairman, when we know that we're at the end of the public hearing, I would like to just be able to provide a few closing summary remarks. So with that, we'll go right to Dave Sullivan, please.
I think I'm unmuted now. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Again, for the record, David Sullivan from Mylona McBroom. What I've done in the interim is try to address a question or two that was outstanding, which I'll go over. I did have an opportunity to read the additional correspondence, and I'll quickly go through some of that. Most of it, I believe, I've already responded to. So I'll touch on the subjects again to just refresh my responses. If you'd like me to go into more detail in any of these topics, I'd be happy to do so. The first thing is, at the last hearing, there was a request about how this particular development would compare to the former nursing home in terms of a number of traffic trips. So we did do a comparison, and that was submitted to the commission. And what we found is the numbers are quite close. During the morning peak hour, the new development, based on the Institute of Transportation Engineer statistics, would generate 4 more trips than a nursing home would. in the afternoon peak hour, about 10 more trips. So as you can see, it's fairly similar, slight increase, but for all intents and purposes, not a substantial change in the amount of traffic that was previously there for quite a few years. The second thing I'll touch on, I think in one of the letters they talked about the state had come out and cleared the sightlines. That could be true for the sightline looking to the west. My client, in fact, went out and cleared the sightline looking to the east. I'm not quite sure if it was the state why they stopped short, but it does demonstrate, regardless of who did it, it does demonstrate that if that is adequately trimmed in the summer, that certainly the sightlines would be adequate. We do still expect to have conversation with DOT about this whole process, find out what their protocol is, how often they do this, and if we can improve on their efficiency somehow, we'd like to get into a conversation with them to find out, to make sure that those sightlines do remain safe. The next thing I'd like to touch on is the parking. There were a number of questions having to do with the parking, so I'll just go over again what I presented at the last hearing and try to fill in some of the gaps that I think were some of the questions. We looked at 3 sources of data. The first source is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They give us statistics for all multifamily housing, regardless of the size. And using that statistic, it would generate 149 parking demand using the ITE. The second one we looked at was what we call ULI, which is the Urban Land Institute. The difference in the Urban Land Institute, they take the 85th percentile, not the average parking demand, but then they segregate the data by the size of the units. So looking at that more refined data from Urban Land Institute, they would estimate a demand of 130. And then we have our own data. We have some 60 or so data points. Most of that data was in Connecticut. So there was one comment having to do with, is there any regional data? Well, this is all regional data, again, mostly Connecticut. There is some New York, New Jersey in there as well, in New York, New Jersey suburbs. And using our data, we would come up with an estimate of 143. So the 3 data sources are all generally in that 130 to 150 range. And as you know, 183 are being proposed initially, with the rest being able to be built if needed. We strongly feel that 183 will be adequate. Now, one other piece of this whole parking thing is there was a couple of comments throughout the literature that I reviewed about whether visitors and service vehicles, well, when they collect these statistics, all those vehicles are included. And I think I mentioned that last time, but it's not like they go around and just count residents' cars. They count all the cars to collect the data, where such as in our 60 data points, we count all the cars, which includes visitors and it includes service vehicles that would be there, happen to be there during peak times. So hopefully that does clarify some things. Reading through the literature, I found, I guess, 4 common threads again. I'll try to address it that way. And most of these, again, I've already addressed. One was the parking, and I just talked about the parking, so I won't say any more about that unless you want me to. The OSTA process was another one, and the DOT process in general, and what's that all about. So let me just clarify what our plan is here, and when we go to who, at what time, and what the timeline looks like. So in this particular case, we're dealing with the Office of State Traffic Administration. If this was a smaller development, you wouldn't even have the opportunity to deal with them because they would have no purview over it. They do have purview over this project. And you have a representative, which is your local traffic authority, which in this case is the police chief. So he represents the town. Some of the comments about Waterbury Road were from him, others were not from him. But regardless, he would be part of the process. He'll be copied on all the correspondence. And we would be happy before we made a submission to make sure that we have a separate itemized list of concerns that he thinks we should address with the Department of Transportation. Now, with that being said, let me just be clear. We did a traffic study here, and the traffic study is looking for impacts to existing conditions. Number one, we found that there would be no change in the operating conditions. We then looked for safety concerns. We found no safety concerns that either exist or are being exacerbated with the statistics that you would look at. Are there accidents? Are there things of that nature? So we're not creating any, we're not exacerbating any. Now, there's been a lot of anecdotal discussions about things about Waterbury Road, and we'll be happy to bring those to DOT's to their attention as we go through this process. But once again, I just want to make it clear, we are not affecting any conditions out there or impacting any operating conditions. Next category, I guess, is the last category, which had to do with the sightlines in general. I did discuss that a little bit. We will work with the district office, the maintenance office, to find out what their protocols are and see if we can get some more efficiencies put into that. And the last thing on sightlines, there were some questions about how we measured, where we measured, and I think I went over it last time, but just to be clear again, the driver's eye of if a driver was sitting in the passenger seat, the assumption is that he or she is 15 feet from the edge of the travel way. In this particular case, 15 feet from the edge of the travel way is from the edge of the white shoulder line. So you go 15 feet into Hazel Drive, and that's where the driver would be sitting. And they're looking at a vehicle coming, assuming we're looking to the left, it's coming westbound, and that driver is X amount of feet away, depending on the speed, and their height of eye sitting in their car is 3.5 feet. That's the mechanics of how we measure it and how we determine what's available and what is safe. I think, oh, there's one more issue I'll just quickly touch on because I think my colleague Ryan will talk more specifically about it. But the pedestrian accommodations, the sidewalk, there is a sidewalk there on the west side of the road. Ryan and I talked a number of times and collaborated to get a nice connection. So there's a connection from the site to the roadway with a crosswalk system that gets you safely across the street to the sidewalk system, which would get you to Waterbury Road. So that's my summary, and I'd be happy to again drill down on anything the commission would like, but I tried to keep it without being too repetitive. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have one question. You just
Sure.
Something about OSTA, where you said you can bring some of the issues to OSTA when you go to speak with them. So I tend to agree with the sidewalk that's on the west side of Hazel Drive where it ends and doesn't get close to Waterbury Road. I mean, is that something that we can make sure that you bring up with OSTA? I mean, maybe they bring it up anyways, but that would be something I would like to see OSTA look at in detail.
To be clear, looking at making the sidewalk, extending it out to Waterbury Road.
I mean, when you talk about, I mean,
Sure.
maybe even, I don't know how school buses work too. The number of school kids in the area, it might get school buses down that road. I don't know how that works, but if not, just looking at where it stops, and I believe someone said it was, I don't know how far it is, but 170 feet, 190 feet, there is no sidewalk to go into Waterbury Road. And maybe they would address that already, but I was just wondering.
Again, there is sidewalk on the west side. It's really about, maybe 15 feet short of getting out to I'll call it the Waterbury Road proper, but it does go all the way out there. It's not hundreds of feet away. It's difficult to see because a lot of it is covered with brush and debris, so that needs to be daylighted. But to answer your question, we could certainly address it with DOT. They would want to understand why we want to put a sidewalk in there right away. But if it's something the town is interested in, it could certainly be on our list of discussion items with them.
I can tell you by looking at the sidewalk, I was up there again today. Maybe the town needs to go up there and look at it because it almost looks non-existent to me. If it does go up to the 15-foot, it's pretty well buried. So it's something that's have to be addressed for sure.
Yeah,
Whether-
Ryan could probably give you some more specific dimensions on that because I know he was out there he was the one actually that said, yes, there is a sidewalk here, Dave. We had this conversation. So he might be able to tell you a little bit more about the specific geometry out there and how far it gets to the intersection. But certainly we'd be happy to put that. If you wanted to make that a condition, we could put it on.
I would definitely like to see that a condition to make sure that they look at that. And as far as the sidewalk issue, I see Ryan chiming in, but why don't we wait till Ryan does his presentation, and then I'm sure there might be some more questions from commission members for you, Dave.
Mr. Kurtz, Lutadisco. Yeah, we heard Mr. Sullivan explain that the town's representative with respect to the State Traffic Commission is the police chief. And if there's things that we think should be brought to the Department of Transportation, you can bring them to Mr. Sullivan, certainly, but also they should be brought to the police chief. He's the one who would be representing Cheshire and such. They would be interacting with him. Plus, he's a knowledgeable person about traffic. So if we thought there was something dangerous, he's the person to go to and hopefully convince him and let him take it to the state.
Sure, and I would happy to be the messenger for him.
Okay. I saw Mr. Natale with the hand up.
I want to go back to the parking a little bit. So with the parking, in your statistics and when you're putting your numbers together, how many visitors and service vehicles are you anticipating at any given time being on the property?
Well, with residential, the peak times for residential are really overnight. So I don't have the breakdown at home with me, but they do give you a breakdown. But what you see is the visitors tend to be during the daylight hours and early evening, and the service vehicles tend to be daytime as well. And at those times, the residential parking goes down. So the peak parking typically is overnight for a residential development, and there'd be little to no service vehicles and maybe a visit or two if it's an overnight guest.
So you don't have any estimate from your numbers?
I do not. And again, while the other presentations are going on, I could see if I can access it.
And I'll let you know where I'm going with that too, because when I'm looking at this, you have 48 studio apartments, assuming that, studio, one person. As you've heard, it's not really close to the bus line. It's hard for people to walk across Waterbury Road, if not impossible. There's no crosswalks or anything. So, assuming that most of those folks are going to have a car, based on your statistics of 143 parking spaces, that's 1.25 per unit. If you have 48 in the studios, that only leaves 95 left for the other 66 apartment units. That's being the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom. That's 66, including visitors, service vehicles, or anything else. So when you're looking for us to reduce the number of parking spaces, those numbers are not adding up too well. So again, looking at the 1-bedroom, from what we heard in the last public hearing, 1-bedroom, 1.5 people per bedroom. For the 2 bedrooms, 1.5 people per bedroom. Assuming, let's say, the 2nd bedroom is kids, let's not go there. So the 1-bedroom in the 1-bedroom, the 1-bedroom in the 2-bedroom units, you're talking again another 66 parking spaces needed. So again, you're not leaving much room at all for visitors. And that's, doing the quick math there, that's only a couple parking spots for visitors if you limit it to the 183 or so that you're proposing rather than the full load that's required.
Well, again, when, I understand the math. Maybe I'm not making it clear. So let's take the service vehicles, for instance. The service vehicles are coming during the day. During the day, people have left to go to work, to whatever their activities are, they're gone. So typically, if you have 100 cars that are parked overnight, during the middle of the day, there might be 50 or less of those cars parked on a site. So the service vehicles are clearly accommodated because they're coming at those daytime hours. Now, people start arriving back home and you start going back up from that 50 to 100% through the evening. So it starts going back up from 5 to 6, from 6 to 7, 7 to 8. That's also the time when you do have the visitors. So what the statistics tell us is that the amount of visitors is less than the people that still have not come home, whether they're out visiting someone else, whether they're out to dinner, whether they work nights, maybe they work retail and aren't home later. So what the statistics tell us is that when the visitors are peaking, and I'm sorry I don't have that number, they're really using the parking spaces that are available because the residents aren't there yet. So what it's telling us is the time when there's the most cars parked on a residential development, it's when all the residents are home, which is 100% of the statistical data.
So what do these statistics say about the efficiencies or the studio apartments? Are you accounting for each of them having one car?
Well, let me take it by source. ITE does not discriminate between 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms efficiencies. They just say a multifamily apartment and they figure it out based on that. So they don't fine tune the data and they actually come up with the highest number of our 3 sources. ULI does do that. So what they say is for a studio efficiency apartment, they say 1 bedroom, 1 parked vehicle per dwelling unit. They say for a 1 bedroom, you would increase that a little bit to 1.05. For a 2 bedroom residential unit, they use 1.8 for each of the 2 bedroom units. So what that comes out to is for the efficiency in the 1 bedroom, there's about 98, and for the 2 bedrooms, 32, which gets us to their number of 130. Now, the third source, which is our data, we did not have the ability to break it out, efficiency versus 1 bedroom. But when we look at all of the 1 bedroom data, which includes efficiency, our data says if you're not near downtown and you're not near a train station or a bus depot, then you should plan on 1.2 cars per 1 bedroom unit, including the efficiencies. And for the 2 bedroom units, more like 1.5 or 1.49 is what ours tells us. So we come up with the 143, which interestingly is in the middle of the other 2 sources. But that's, so the efficiencies in one of the data sources is broken down, and in the other one, not quite in ours.
Gotcha. So again, what I was doing was looking at the efficiencies as 1 car per, and taking that into account. There's, again, 66 units left and only 95 spots for those 66 units plus overnight visitors. So again, the 183 just does not seem adequate.
Mr. Commissioner Talley.
I'm missing something.
Yeah, there's 48 studios.
48 studios, okay.
And if we have 1 parking space per studio, that leaves us with 183 minus 48, which is 135.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm looking at it as Realistically, I'm sorry, I'm not looking at statistics. I'm looking realistically for a 2-bedroom unit. You're probably going to have 2 cars. It's not, I don't see how they're going to have 1.8 cars with no
Okay.
bus lines or anything available. And I'm looking at the single bedrooms also with what was represented last time, saying 1.5 people per 1-bedroom apartment. Looking at that for 2 cars also. So that's where our difference is. I think that looking at it realistically versus statistically, looking at, I'm sorry, let me go back a second. Looking at it statistically, the 3 models that you quoted differ. So there is no exact science to this. So I'm just concerned.
I think we should, if I could, I'd like to go through your math because I think this is very important. So you're saying efficiency, 1 space per efficiency unit.
So that would be 48.
48 for let's do the 2-bedroom next, 2 spaces per 2-bedroom, which would be 36, right?
Yes.
Which leaves, that's.
This is another 48 for the
80
1-bedroom.
Leaves 99 for 48 1-bedrooms.
So
I think even if we went two per unit for the 1 and 2 bedrooms and 1 per unit for the efficiencies, we probably still,
we still exceed that.
yeah, so.
So let me just go through it one more time, just so we're clear. 48 units for studios, that's 48 spaces.
Yep.
That leaves us 135 spaces remaining, and that's 66 units with single or 2-bedroom apartment, single or 2-bedroom units. So that's a ratio of 135 divided by 66 of 2.04, so over 2.
And that leaves you, again, with not many spaces for any visitors.
Well, again, everybody's not parked there 24/7, so there is that shared parking component that takes place.
Okay, and just Ryan, just make sure we're looking at the math again correctly. So studios with 1, the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom with 2. That's a total of 180 parking spaces that would be needed.
That's correct. Based on the logic that, yeah.
And you're looking for 183, which leaves
That's
3
correct.
spaces for 114 units for visitors.
That's correct. And based on the statistics where all conditions are considered, visitors, occupants, service vehicles, maximum parking demand, based on the statistics, which incorporates all those items, relates to a lower demand than what we're even proposing. We're proposing still about 40 spaces, 30 to 40 spaces beyond what the statistics suggest. So that's why when we say that we're comfortable that we're providing adequate parking with 183, that's essentially the logic that we're applying, is that we're well above what the statistics suggest. And again, we have provided for how 228 spaces would be accommodated on the site. We included that as part of our wetlands application, included those spaces as part of our drainage analysis. So the presence of those spaces has been considered. However, we feel that those spaces are really unnecessary for the function of the site, will increase the impervious surface unnecessarily, again, in our opinion, and limit the opportunity for additional vegetation.
So basically, though, it's hedging the bet that the 1 and 2 bedrooms are not all going to have 2 cars.
That's correct.
Okay.
Or more than 2. If they have 2, we're still okay.
Skirts.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Stroll.
I just a couple questions. The only time I see a problem is on a holiday or some type of year where there's gatherings, and I think the extra spots are a necessity. My girlfriend lives in a condo. During the holidays, there's nowhere to park, and I mean, I see the problem. So I couldn't even imagine here when there's actually more units than what are at her complex. So I really don't I don't see how we cannot have the extra parking in this application. The other thing that I've been listening to is when you did the traffic study, was it based on traffic right now or based on traffic in January or February where it's normal traffic, Mr. Sullivan? That's what I wanted to understand.
Yep, understood. We did our traffic counts prior to the epidemic being declared.
Okay.
So we were about a week ahead of it, believe it or not.
Okay, and the other thing that I'm saying is, because I mean, you know, the world's changing and people are going to stay home more. So I think, you know, that's another consideration for parking. I mean, if you have people that are not leaving, they're going to be staying. And then, you know, people are bunking up. So maybe that one bedroom efficiency, that person might have a significant other that is staying with them that might have a car. So, you know, that's what I'm saying, that I really, it's not even an issue with me. I mean, I think it's needed. So
If I could just make one more point, and Ryan did touch on it, but if you believe our statistics, which I tend to because they're ours, there'll be some 40 extra spaces there. So
yeah,
it's not like we're coming up with our estimate based on these three sources and saying we expect the demand to be 180 and we're doing 183. We're expecting the demand to be somewhere below 150, probably between 140 and 150. So we're going to have, in our opinion, a reserve of probably 30 to 40 parking spaces at the 183 number. Have I ever been wrong in 30 years? Absolutely. So if I am, Ryan has identified where that additional parking would go.
well, like I said, I can't get past the additional parking because a lot of people are staying home and, you know, family members are joining them and all that stuff. I really think the additional parking is a necessity from the beginning. And that's my opinion.
Respectfully, if I could just jump in, I just wanted to go ahead and say, with regard to, I lost my train of thought there, but with regard to the parking spaces, at least, I just want to be clear here that I'm looking at numbers on the parking demand and their statistics. And we have three different organizations that are giving us statistics about the parking. So one is ITE, and they're saying that 149 parking spaces is statistically what they estimate. ULI is saying statistically they estimate 130 spaces based on what this is. And MMI, which is what you put together, regional analysis, they're estimating 143 spaces on here. The reason I'm asking, I just want to make sure those are correct because I'm hearing a lot of anecdote and I'm seeing data, and those two aren't adding up. And at least in my opinion, I'm going to go with the data over the anecdote. So are those numbers correct?
If it was directed towards me, the comment, I would agree with you that anecdotally we can get ourselves in trouble if we start taking assumptions such as the one bedrooms will have 2 cars per unit. You know, while it gives us we can do it in this case because we have enough factor of safety, but that anecdote shouldn't cloud the data, which says we're gonna have some reserve parking here.
Thank you. I just find it interesting that adding more parking spaces means we're going to be increasing the size of this development. And one of the things that I think we as commissioners should be considering is, you know, how it is that we can make sure that this development fits with the character of the neighborhood. And frankly, I just don't see how adding 7 to 8 single family homes worth of impervious surface is going to do that.
Okay, I don't have everybody that I can see everybody. Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Sullivan?
I do. Looking at the trip generations, daily trips increased 40%, but if you combine your total of your peak hours of trips, they only went up 18%. Can you explain why there's a big discrepancy there?
I could give you what I think it is. I don't have the hourly breakdown, but in a nursing home, it has different travel patterns, so most of it is shift work. So you have the employees coming and going. So while you might have a more concentrated peak, it's not drifting out through the whole day. For example, when we talked about the morning peak hour at the last hearing, one of the reasons the morning peak hour often feels low is because in that hour, for example, there's 41 in the morning, but the hour before there might be 35, and the hour after there might be 25. So it's more of a gradual peaking phenomenon with residential. So they tend to fill up the off hours more than something that's shift work. So you may have the 37, but outside of that, those shift hours, it might be 10 instead of 25. Does that help?
But wouldn't your peak hours want to be when you have the most traffic, that hour before or hour after, when you shift that?
It is. But the hours outside of the peak are not as dramatically lower for something that's shift work.
I mean, because the nursing home was still pretty high for something that you think would be a little flat line, not in the mornings, not in the afternoon, not during peak hours, unless there's nurses coming in and out.
Correct. So, and you can see in the morning peak hour where the residential, I don't know if you have the table handy, but for the residential, we have most of the traffic leaving the site during the morning peak hour. And in the morning peak hour for the nursing home, most of the traffic is coming in. So that's the shift workers coming in and a smaller amount going out, which is probably the overnight workers or people that got dropped off.
Okay. And then when you talk to the state about the sidewalks, I know there's a steel guardrail up there. So I've been up there a few times. I don't know what you can do about that. The stop line that's up there, is that 15 feet back from the white line on 70 that you speak of, or is it further back?
I think it's a little bit further back, to tell you the truth, but certainly stop lines are suggestions anyway. Most people pull up beyond the stop bar.
But in case of an accident or incident, who's at fault? If you're not stopped behind that line and then you get hit and get on traffic, what percentage of fault is left on you? I was there a couple times. One time was about 2.5 minutes wait to get out there, and a pretty slow time during the day, just the way the traffic was going. I was up there just this Saturday, late morning. It took almost 4 minutes to pull out, and I was going towards Blackie's, not against traffic. With the sidewalk and the kids with the buses, I hope that the town will look at bringing buses down there to a safer area. I know cars at bus time, if they're trying to pull into Hazel, they're going to have to scoot across that traffic rather quickly. I think that's unsafe for our children. And then do you have any numbers of what you anticipate children, how many children are going to be in this complex? How many families with younger children that might be going to school is going to be?
Yeah, I don't know that number. I do know that we talked to Luther Miller. He heads up the transportation for the town. And he said they do not go down those side streets. They pull up to the intersections if there are children. So if there's one child or two children, then he would make a stop at Hazel. The lights and the flashers would go on, so there should be zero other activity until the children embark or disembark. I don't think he'll be going down, sending the bus down the side streets.
Got it. And I'm more worried about the children waiting for the bus to get there. Cars zipping back and forth, cutting across, eastbound, coming westbound, that type of situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't, I don't think there was a stop there this year. So, and school obviously was interrupted, so I didn't have an opportunity to observe what happens. But certainly the bus company is not going to want the students standing out in an area that's unsafe. I'm not sure where they go. They may be down near the terminus of the sidewalk, which means when the bus comes, they would just have to walk up around the curve to the bus. That's what I would think is probably the most logical.
I know I've heard from other residents. I haven't seen that much in any of the emails, but some have talked to me about snow conditions and what it is in the winter and how those kids are gonna get up that sidewalk, even if it's plowed or not. It probably won't be. They don't maintain it as it is now. And then extra 100 feet from the end of it, past that guardrail, where do we plow? How safe is that gonna be for our kids?
Yeah, Ryan could address how far it is from the intersection.
It's,
I don't know if there's anything else in there to respond to. Right, is that 100 feet from the terminus there? I could.
no, the end of the sidewalk is essentially at the end of the right-of-way for Waterbury Road. So actually the town GIS map does show it rather accurately, even though you can't visually see it today. It terminates, I'd say, from the paved portion of Waterbury Road. My guess would be about 20 to 30 feet.
Right, which is probably about where the guide rail wraps around.
Yeah, it's basically just past the end of the guide rail by maybe 5 feet.
Yeah.
Well, whoever that property owner is that owns that sidewalk is going to need to do some work very soon, because that is not visible at all. I was up there today. You cannot see that sidewalk at all.
If you kick away about 1.5 inches of leaf debris, it's there.
Okay, well, someone's going to have to do some work on that for whether this happens or not. Okay, any other questions?
Are we taking questions besides traffic patterns and parking at this point?
I was going to try and let them give their presentation, each person at a time, and do the questions there. And of course, at the end, questions, I'm not going to cut anything off. So
sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one last thing on the sidewalk. We agree with you. The property owner should clear it. I think the sidewalk maintenance is likely within the town's right of way and the town's maintenance obligation. So the town could do it as well. But if I'd check with my client on it, if it's absolutely necessary when if our development is approved and it's built and operational, if the sidewalk still looks like that, my client is willing to offer one time to clear it when we open the development, not to take on the ongoing maintenance obligation, but to clear it up front, we would do that.
Okay, thank you. You have more, the next person in line? I don't know if it's Mr. McElroy or
John Pruitt, just to answer one question from a commissioner that I believe we owe you an answer.
Okay, thank you. Is he on the call now?
He's muted, but yes, he's on. You're on mute, John. There you go.
No, I'm unmuted. Okay. One question that was raised by the commission had to do with the area of the roof. Indeed, when you pitch a roof at 4 and 12, there is a marginal increase in the actual flat area of the roof. We were originally starting around 15,200 square feet. And when I calculated the total area of the roof of each of the two buildings, it calculates to 16,170 square feet. So that would be the answer to that question. But while I'm here, I'd be more than happy to entertain any other questions regarding the architecture of the building itself.
Yes. What's the full height of the building from the lowest level on the back side of the buildings? The drawings here don't have that dimensions on there.
Okay. I did issue a drawing to, let me just open this attachment on the email, and hopefully I can. All right. Yeah, I issued a, I don't know if this, okay, let me just, I issued a drawing. Let me just blow this up if I can. It has some dimensions. Let's just see. Bear with me a second. Okay, the height of the height at the 3-story part to the peak of the highest portion of the roof is about 48 feet. In the back, from the ground to the peak of the roof is 56 feet. And these drawings I had issued to Ryan McAvoy in attempt to, further clarify and help him answer his questions regarding the building height that were raised to him.
I believe there's a 50-foot height restriction. Is that from the lowest point? Is that from the highest point? Where this would, to me, would seem falls out of that.
If I may take that on, Commissioner Brigado. So the building height is measured as an average between the peak of the roof and the average grade around the building. So our building, the average grade around, this is now, we're referring to the southerly building, but it's essentially the same calculation for both structures. The average grade is about 540 around the southerly of the two. And the peak of the roof, the longitudinal north to south or lengthwise is 588. That represents a building height of 48 feet. Now, the numbers that John we're giving you with respect to the dimensions was to the absolute top peak of the architectural feature over the entrance. And your regulations do allow for minor architectural features such as that to not be considered for building height, particularly when they're not habitable. So with respect to our calculation, we use the peak of the roof along the longitudinal north to south lengthwise across the majority of the building, with the lone exception of the leftmost side as you see it on your screen, which is 588, and that puts us at a building height of 48 feet for your regulations.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions for the architect?
Yes, Mr. Schrader.
Yes, Mr. Ty.
Yep. So I'm not sure, again, if this is for the architect or Mr. McAvoy. So in the letter that we received, in the last hearing, question was asked about what is the current elevation of the nursing homes. In the letter that we received, it says that the range of the elevation is 559. How many feet is that? So how tall is?
How tall is the building? I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
I think he's having a little issue with the internet connection.
The height of the existing building was measured in the field, and there's actually about a foot parapet that's been demolished off the edge. But we estimated the height of the building at about 559. So with the peak of our roof, again, the majority of the longitudinal north to south peak of 588 versus 559, that ends up being a 29-foot difference between the peak of the roof of our building on the southerly building, and the building that's there today. Part of that's due to the fact that we have a pitched roof. The building that's there today is a flat roof. Part of that's due to an additional story being proposed. And part of that is being the difference in story-to-story elevation on our proposed building as compared to what exists today.
Okay, I don't know if Mr. Talley, I can't tell if he's on the call or not on the call, but hopefully that answers his question. Anyone else questions on the architecture of the building. Okay, and again, anyone can ask questions at any time. So if Mr. Williams, as Mr. McAvoy next to speak, or what do you
Yes.
have?
Yes,
Okay.
he has a few things.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't believe I ever introduced myself formally before. Maybe for the record, I should state that my name is Brian McAvoy. I'm a licensed professional engineer with Mylona McBroom. Just again, sort of bookkeeping for those watching at home. A couple things I wanted to go over, documents that we submitted, responses to some of the comments from staff and the commission. Firstly, we did receive an updated comment letter from the Cheshire Fire Department. Generally, we take no exception to the comments as proposed. We did provide the fire department a truck turning movement through the site. And ultimately, what they like to do, what they typically like to do in these type of developments, which is referenced in their letter, is before the curbs actually get installed, they'd like to do a drive-through with their ladder truck just to see if there's any additional considerations for mountable curbs that they may wish to see on the site. Also, to make sure that there's adequate space for their ladder, which extends beyond the front of the truck, that if any trees need to get adequately separated from that portion of the truck, then they get shifted before they get installed. So the remainder of the comments were regard to ultimate location of fire hydrants and some items associated with the buildings themselves, again, code compliance issues primarily. So we take no exception to their comments. We also did prepare, as Dave Sullivan alluded to, a 8.5 by 11 graphic showing how we would extend sidewalks or crosswalks rather through our site to get access to the existing sidewalk on Hazel Drive. That would involve a couple stretches of additional sidewalk on our property, on what we had shown previously, and a couple additional crosswalks, again, one of which crosses Hazel Drive itself. There were some discussion from the neighbors and my understanding from some of the commission members regarding clearing vegetation and wildlife. I touched on this at the last meeting, but I do want to make it clear with this proposal, we consider this to be a redevelopment of an existing disturbed property. There's obviously significant buildings, parking there presently. There were large portions of this site that were cleared, graded, modified historically for septic systems and access across the wetlands. What we are seeking to do is to utilize essentially the area that's been developed, that's been changed, that's been modified historically for the purposes of this development. We did have one of our wetland expert and environmental expert, Matt Sanford, review the species and nature of the property being disturbed. It comprises mostly of invasive species that provide very little in the way of habitat for any wildlife of special concern, threatened or endangered species. Primarily, it provides habitat for common mammals and urbanized developments. So there is very little in the way of clearing of natural vegetation on this site. There are some areas that have reforested over the past few decades, namely on the slope near the northerly of the two buildings that was installed in order to construct the septic field. So there are some wooded areas that are several decades old perhaps that we're going to be clearing. That amounts to less than really an acre of land. So in terms of clearing of wooded vegetated areas, it's much more consistent with what you might see with a couple single family homes in an R20 zone. So we feel confident that what we've attempted to do on this site is to keep the limit of development within the footprint of what's existed historically and not expand beyond that. Also, as I mentioned at the last meeting, I just want to reiterate, we do have a significant portion of the property, roughly 2/3 or 3/4 rather, that we are not proposing anything on. And that is namely the area of the wetlands, of course, the pond itself, and all the remaining areas of the property on the east side of the wetland corridor off Lakeside Ave, Larson Avenue. And that area is contiguous with a very large tract of open space owned by the town of Cheshire. Additionally, we are proposing what I would consider to be a fairly robust landscaping plan with hundreds of shade trees, ornamental trees, detailed plantings around the foundation of the buildings, plantings for the detention basins themselves on the slopes on the backside of the berms. We do have a number of trees, roughly 18 trees proposed between the southerly of the two buildings, or the one on the left, and in the wetland areas that do not exist today. The building is being removed some 70 feet further away from the pond than what is shown, and we're replacing that. Obviously, we do have access around the back of the building from the garage, but the 18 trees we are proposing include maple, dogwoods, which are flowering trees that grow. The flowering trees grow to 20 to 30 feet high. The maples can grow even higher, 40 to 50 feet. So again, all these are plantings between the building and the pond that don't exist today, that we feel will provide for an enhanced vegetative buffer between the building and the pond, and ultimately the neighbors across the street. Likewise, we have a very thick stand of evergreens along the edge of the parking between the two buildings, and those comprise mostly of spruces, which will grow to as much as 40 to 50 feet tall, and provide tremendous visual blockage from the parking areas in the central portion of the site to the pond, and of course properties on the other side of the opposite side of the pond.
But those two set of trees on the southerly side and in the middle, if we were to require those additional parking spots, those would go away, correct?
In part, yes. They could be shifted, downgrading somewhat, but we will have less space between the edge of the parking and the detention pond, and less space ultimately to the well. So I don't believe that we would have to eliminate all of them, but I certainly feel that the additional vegetation and the opportunity for additional trees is something that is worth consideration, particularly where we're seeking deferment of parking spaces in areas that are between the units and the pond.
Is that the only type of noise abatement or ways to deal with the noise going across the pond? Because I've lived on the water, and voices do travel rather easily across water, and I can see what the residents were complaining about even when the nursing home was there. And with all these people and all the traffic, it's going to be considerably worse.
Well, I would just offer again that we're providing dozens really of additional plantings between the building and what's there today and the residents across the street, and what we're proposing today. So in terms of noise abatement, I'm really not well studied in that aspect, but I do know the additional vegetation certainly wouldn't hurt. I can't state that they're not going to hear anything across the pond. Likewise, I'm sure this property, even though there's no one there today, probably hears activity on the opposite side of the pond today. So I can't say it's going to completely eliminate noise. There's a certain amount that's expected with residential development, but I do feel that what we've proposed is a pretty intense amount of vegetation, certainly along the pond, separating the paved portion of the buildings and the pond itself.
Is there any kind of fence line along the pond for safety that you've looked into?
There is a fence line there presently that we're proposing to keep. It may have to be maintained in some areas where it's been damaged. There's a small chain link fence that separates the slope down to the pond itself and the site. That is not proposed to be removed as part of this, although I do expect portions of it will have to be repaired because a lot of the site's in disrepair today.
So all of the pond is on this property, correct?
I would say the majority of it, not all of it.
Okay, and liability of use of the pond for the neighbors across, where does that lie? And do they currently use it for anything, boating or swimming or whatnot?
I'm going to defer to Attorney Williams for that question.
Did you ask where does the liability lie if our neighbors use our pond?
Yeah, I mean, are they allowed to use it? Is there going to be restrictions. I don't know how it is now, if it's used.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, actually. We haven't looked into whether there's use of it now. I think some of the neighbors said something about having a boat, so maybe they have. But I don't have information on that. And so I don't think there's been any discussion about there being any restrictions in that regard or any change as to what people's access is.
Yeah, I didn't know if the new property owner would, not allow it. I know there was some talk of having access on your property to get to the wooded area behind that the town owns. I don't know if you looked at that or have any questions on that.
So somebody made a comment about providing access to the hiking trails. I mean, it's not something that anybody has made a specific proposal or request to us. I think that could be looked at. I mean, I think my clients would be open to discussing it. I just don't know. That's a different situation than, people who have lived on the pond and have they been using it versus welcoming the public onto the property. So we would have to look at that, but we're willing to do that and talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
So, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, may I speak next?
This Ms.
Ryan, I had similar questions on the planting of the trees on the back of the property. You mentioned that the trees would be, that there's several trees that will be planted on the, I guess it's the western building?
The one on the left or the southerly building?
Yeah, the building on the
okay.
left, maybe it's western or, well,
Southerly.
building on the left. However, there were no trees planned to be planted on the right-hand building. Is there a reason for that?
Well, the area on the right-hand side does provide access to the stormwater basin, so I'm a little concerned about excessive vegetation there. But we do have hundreds of feet of vegetated wetland areas between that particular building and properties on the opposite side of the lake. So that building, and perhaps you can kind of see in the graphic that you have perhaps on your screen, is that there is quite a bit of existing woodland in that area that does provide a pretty substantial visual buffer.
Okay, so that mottled green area is supposed to be woodlands?
No, that's just one. That's just grassland and specific species or grass mixes that are tolerant for that basin sort of environment. I'm referring to, if you go further down from that area, there's a very large area of wetlands between that particular building.
Oh, I see. Okay, maybe I'm looking at the picture wrong. So gee, I wish I could point to it. So the pond ends somewhere
to the left,
in the middle of those two buildings.
That's correct.
And to the right is, okay, I see, I'm looking at the map.
Wooded wetlands.
So that's kind of natural. That's a natural barrier to cut down on sound generation.
I would say that that's accurate.
So the area that we have the most concern with is that left-hand building. That's the one that will potentially annoy people across the pond. As one of the residents mentioned, that somebody in the nursing home did something and it was like in their backyard. So, I mean, that building on the left could be a potential noise or sound generator. And so my question is, are the trees that are planned to be planted, will they cut down on the noise enough? Can we assure the residents that would be cut the sound generation down enough? And possibly, should we do a sound, is there such a thing as a sound study or a potential sound study? Is that within the purview of the application?
I'm not an expert on sound generation, Gil, so I'm not necessarily comfortable making a characterization about whether or not they're going to hear sound or not. I suspect that if they heard it at the convalescent home, I suspect they'll probably hear some noise from this site. How much, I couldn't say. Right. I can't say that we're adding quite a bit of vegetation that doesn't exist today between where the building is, where the convalescent home was, and those properties to the
Yeah,
other.
I mean, I do know that if there, excuse me, if there's existing, if there's something going on in an existing location that is generating sound, that is annoying residents, then the state or engineers can do a sound study. However, we don't know. It's a future possibility. It could be a problem. It may not be a problem.
And I don't believe that there's a noise ordinance in Cheshire. I could be wrong, but I don't believe there's a
Well,
noise ordinance in Cheshire.
Yeah, there's a state noise ordinance.
I can speak to
We had
that.
that issue on another application, but the thing that would exacerbate this is that the fact that the sound, any sound generated, would go over this body of water, which exacerbates it tremendously, right? So I don't know if I'm being clear. You know, are we planting enough trees, or are we doing enough to mitigate the future generation of sound? I guess that's my question.
Commissioner Linder, I've dealt with the DEP regulations on that a few times, and they do have a dBA or noise limit depending on time of day. If you have an industrial or a commercial use that borders a residential use, and when you have that sort of conflict, if you will, in uses, then DEP says you cannot exceed, I think it's 45 decibels during the day, and then you get to so-called quiet hours, you cannot exceed, or it's 55 during the day, then it goes down to 45 at quiet hours, which usually last from, I think it's 11 p.m. until 7 a.m. Monday through Saturday, and then 9 a.m. on Sundays. It's not something that I've ever seen applied to two neighboring residential uses where there isn't anything about the use that is likely to generate any particular unusual or disruptive amount of noise to a neighbor. I mean, it is true that sound can carry more across water,
right?
Which is true when you decide to live against water, that may be the case. And there's been development on this site over the years for a long time that may have generated normal amounts of sounds, and there's certainly nothing about this development that would be any different or do anything more or noisier. So that there's just some observations I would share with.
Right, I
Yeah,
agree.
water
but-
doesn't,
I'm sorry.
water doesn't exacerbate sound, it just carries it further.
Well, I'm not saying it exacerbates it. It allows it to travel further and helps it along. But I guess my question again is the selection of trees and whatever's going to be planted in that area, are there certain kinds of trees or bushes that might mitigate sound more than what you guys may be planning? I'm just looking to maximize the reduction of sound. That's all.
I don't want to go outside my expertise, but let me say this: if the commission felt like in that area, we have proposed mostly deciduous trees, I believe, Ryan, maples and dogwoods and rosebud, I believe it's called, or redbud.
Redbud, yeah.
And then in between the buildings, below the parking area, we've proposed a lot of evergreen species that we think will very adequately screen view of the parking area. If the commission wanted us to add a few evergreen species between the south building and the pond area, or maybe substitute or intermix, whatever it is that would make sense if a landscape architect would look at it. But to include more evergreen species, I believe my client would be open to that idea.
Okay, well, that sounds reasonable. I had a related question. These trees, I'm not sure if this was brought up, but these trees that you plan on, they will grow quite large, correct?
Yes.
So that will mitigate the impact of the multi-story building.
Yes. So the flower.
It will cover the first couple of, at least the first couple of floors.
Yeah, so we estimate that the flowering dogwoods and the eastern redbuds that are on the we'll call it below the parking, on the side of the parking, grow anywhere from 20 to 30 feet in height, and the maples that we have along the landscaped islands closer to the building itself. Again, ideal conditions can grow to 40 or 50 feet.
Yeah, okay, well, that's good. That's good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. I do have a couple other things, Mr. Chairman, if I could just run through them real quick. I know it's getting late, but I just want
Sure, go ahead.
other items. We did submit a lighting plan, a photometric plan showing the impact or the effectiveness of our lighting plan as it relates to providing appropriate illumination on parking and driveway areas. And that's part of your record. The plan that you have represents a condition where 100% of the illumination capacity of the fixtures is in effect. Although our client, our Lamp Realty, has chosen a light fixture that actually has motion sensing capabilities to provide the opportunity to dim lights when they're not needed, when there is no motion, there's no pedestrians or no vehicular traffic. So that could reduce the glare, I guess, in parking areas by, Tony may wish to correct me on this, but as much as 40%. And then if motion is detected, they will gradually raise up to a illumination level shown on our plan. So I think that would also provide, obviously benefits to the amount of light emanating from this site, and also certainly his electrical cost. But we do have no light emanating or exiting the property towards the pond or budding properties, with the one exception of a light fixture at our driveway entrance, where there is a very minor amount of spillover in the town right of way and in the property immediately to the south or to the left on this sheet. So we do feel it's in accordance with your regulations, section 44, and also the lighting standard requirements for parking, driveway access, and safety at means of egress in and out of the property. I also wanted to touch on, we did discuss the building height, so that was going to be part of my discussion, but I believe we covered that. And the last item I want to discuss, which I think Attorney Williams may want to touch on as well, is we did perform an analysis of the zone change map with respect to the petition that was generated in opposition to the zone change by property owners and neighbors. We analyzed it with respect to Connecticut State Statute, Section 8-3B, which does have certain language that when a petition reaches a certain threshold, it changes the burden of the approval of any zone change from a simple majority of the commission to a 2/3 majority. So that burden exists when property owners within 500 feet of the site have signed a petition in opposition to the zone change. And we did modify the zone change map to show which properties had owners sign the petition, which properties included perhaps either tenants or people who listed their address as one of the properties within 500 feet but were not the owners, and that's shown in blue. So the properties that we feel are eligible with respect to the statutory requirements for voting purposes represent 8.65 acres out of the 80 plus or minus acres that exist within 500 feet of this property. So in terms of the statutory requirements for enhanced voting thresholds, we do not believe that the petition reaches that level. And it was very mechanical analysis. Obviously, it's not to change the reasoning behind their petition or their reasoning for opposing the development. But with respect to that statute, we do feel that the owners don't quite reach that 20% mark.
Did we get everything, Ryan?
I think so.
Any other questions for Mr. McAvoy, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I have a question.
Ms. Stones?
Yep. Getting back to the plantings, you're taking out a lot of invasive species, you said. Are you putting in all native species?
Primarily.
I can't see the schedule that was up there, so.
It's almost exclusively native species as far as my limited knowledge of landscaping. We had our landscape architect put it together, and it's almost exclusively native species. There perhaps are a couple of shrubs and ornamentals that, again, we refer to them as Japanese something or another. There's a couple cases, but in general, it's almost exclusively native species. Certainly not invasive, certainly not species that we would expect to drown out other areas of the property.
Is it possible to make it all native species? Is that a stipulation that you could put in there that you're not, I mean, I don't know exactly which ones are which, but I know that it would be good to have all native species in there.
That's something if the commission feels strongly about, we can certainly,
I do.
yeah, okay. I wish I'm not a landscape architect, so I couldn't.
Okay.
I couldn't speak to
Is
that.
that something they could take into consideration?
Absolutely.
I don't think we'll have any problem doing that. Sure.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, I do. This is more for Bill. Lakeview Ave and Larson Ave, the end of those roads stop into two parcels that's part of this zone change. Is there a possibility that those can be extended into there if they want to do any kind of building later on? I don't care if they're doing building or not. I'd just like to know if those roads are allowed to be extended.
On property that this applicant doesn't control, you talking about that stuff?
I don't know who owns that. I'm looking at the map that you just had.
Let me just say, with respect to any property that this applicant owns that's part of this application, including the zone change, they cannot develop any more of the property. It's all excluded because it's part of the calculation of net buildable acreage. That property had to be excluded, can't be used for any other purpose, has to remain open. So with respect to anybody else's property, I don't want to comment on anybody else's property, but this applicant has no ability to do anything else on any other portion of their property, zero.
So if you were to go back to that last picture where it had the blue and white part of the petition, there's a property, I think it's east. It's above that R20 zone that's in white. Is that part of this or not?
I can, yeah, all the properties in white are properties that did not have any participation in the petition whatsoever.
No, Ryan, this is the bill. The two gray area, there's two gray properties.
Their properties cross-hatched, Rob. Their properties are cross-hatched, okay?
So those two lots, I can't point. We're not together. I don't know how else to say it. There's one that says parcels subject to zone change. Actually, both of those say that.
Yeah.
Is that all one big property, or is that two properties?
It's one big property. It's one big property today, but we highlighted it separately because right now it's split zoned. So right now today, the majority of the property is in the SARDD zone. The eastern, I guess, quarter is R80. So we separate because one of the requirements is that we show the zone lines on the plan. So the zone line splits. It's not a separate property. It's zoned in two different ways.
Got it. So, but you can.
One large
2.2
acre property. Yeah.
So that's locked up. They can't build on that property, Bill?
No way. Impossible. They have no ability to do anything else on their remaining property. Zero.
Fair enough. I would, because of that dashed line in the middle for the two zones, I wasn't sure if it was part of it or not.
Yeah. The special adaptive reuse district only applied to a certain portion of the property. That's why they're showing it that way. And the rest was R80. The underlying district for all of it was R80. So, but they can't use any other remaining property for any development purposes at all. Zero.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? Yes, Mr. Tedesco.
Very, very quickly. I think that anything that the applicant can do, assuming this is approved, to do more of a separation through either vegetation, trees, a fence between the parking lot and the pond, I think you'd be making the neighbors happy by doing that. And you indicated you would be willing to take a look at that. I think that's something that could be important. Again, assuming there's an approval. And just a question I have. I've driven down Hazel Drive a number of times. Right now, you really can't see the property from Hazel Drive because of trees that have grown up over the last 20 years or so. I'm curious as to whether the apartment buildings will be visible from Hazel Drive once the project's finished.
Yes, Commissioner Tedisco, they will be visible when the project's finished. We do have quite a bit of landscaping proposed between the building and Hazel Drive. But I would certainly feel comfortable saying that the buildings certainly will be visible post-construction. Over time, the vegetation will grow and maybe reduce the visibility. But right now, what you see along Hazel Drive are some trees that appear to have been there quite a long time, and then quite a bit of invasive growth that limits any real view of the buildings from Hazel Drive.
Yeah, I think to the extent that you could eliminate visibility, although the building to me looks like it'll be a nice looking building, but people have said that it's out of character with the neighborhood. It's a big apartment building in a neighborhood with it was very nice actually, smaller homes. To the extent that you could hide the buildings, which may not be possible, that might be something that would be preferred by the neighbors. And I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with questions? Any other commission member?
One more question.
Sure, Mr. Natali.
Ryan, when the company that did the lighting plan, did they talk at all about? I know that you're gonna have everything downward facing, and with timers or shutoffs. I forget what exactly you said, but did they talk at all about the light pollution generated by this? Because again, you're gonna be in the middle of the neighborhood, and looking at page 2 of that lighting plan, it looks like an airport at night. And I know it's probably not intended to look that way, but did they talk? Did they talk about that at all?
Well, the lighting plan will have full, your regulations required, first of all. Second of all, the pole heights are only going to be 14 feet maximum, which is the maximum allowed for residential developments. They will have full cutoff features so that all the light is directed downward. There will be no light spilling off the property. There will be no light pollution heading directed up. I believe our client is having a plan that's dark skies compliant. I would just go back to the discussion that we're providing the illumination required by the regulations with fixtures and pole heights that meet your regulation requirements.
Gotcha. Thanks. I just wanted to get that out there because I think it's important for folks watching to realize that you are taking those steps, as I said, especially about the dark skies.
And I would also add that I think the motion detection element is probably somewhat unique. I'm not familiar with any case in town where that's been implemented, and I think it's probably going to be quite a benefit under most circumstances to reduce any light from this property. I think it's kind of a neat idea, frankly.
Thanks.
Are you offering that, Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, just for the record. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other commission members?
I had one comment, Chairman, if I could.
Sure, Mr.
Tedisco kind of hit on it briefly as far as the trail goes along the pond. I know Ryan had mentioned that there's basically a 4-foot drop and it's not accessible, but any railing or fencing or any kind of safety devices that would be put on there would certainly be ideal and appreciated, just for children's safety, adults, dogs, pets, whatever. So
yeah, we can certainly look into that. I think when I say that there's a 4-foot drop, it's not exactly a 4-foot precipice. It's a 4-foot vertical change from along the edge of the pond itself that perhaps, and I wasn't trying to suggest that there be no access to the pond itself, but that it really is not inviting. It's not exactly a flat, unvegetated path to approach right up to the edge of the pond. It is somewhat somewhat of enough of a grade change that it may not be as inviting, but we could certainly look at safety railing, particularly in areas where it is a little steeper.
Great, thank you.
Will that path have any kind of pathway lighting?
I don't believe we're seeking pathway lighting there. It's just really a passive stone dust path along the stormwater basins, along the edge of the wetlands. We're trying to keep it as low key as possible.
Okay, any other commission members with questions? Okay, Mr. Williams, would you like to do your wrap up that you were looking to do?
Yes, thank you. And I want to say thank you to all the commission members and staff on behalf of my client and our team for your diligence and professionalism, and especially for the time that the members of the commission volunteered. We think you all have done your jobs and conducted the town's business in the best way possible during a difficult situation, so we appreciate it. And we've given you lots of information. I believe responded to all the questions and requests that have come to us, so I'm not going to go back through all of it, but what I would like to ask the commission to do is just walk with me through the main facts that have been presented to you and to look at the application through the decision-making rubric or rules that you all have put into place in your regulation. The standard for approving both our zone change application and our special permit application is essentially the same as set forth in the Affordable Housing District Regulation, and that is that the commission shall approve the application unless it finds that denial of the application is required to protect substantial public interests in health, safety, or other matters which the commission may legally consider. Such public interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing, and those public interests cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the petition. So the first factor, the first question for the commission in deciding these two applications is whether the denial of these applications is required to protect any substantial public interest in health or safety or other matters. And the evidence before you, I would contend, shows that there is no such public interest requiring denial of the applications. It's certainly not aesthetics, which would be very unusual to be held up to that level in this type of application. But we're proposing what we believe we have shown would be a material improvement to this property and really removing a blight in the neighborhood by doing so. And we believe, as I'm sure you do, that Cheshire is a wonderful suburban community. It's very well maintained. And I think in Cheshire, it's fair to say that this property over the years meets the definition of a blight. And my clients are proposing to make a substantial investment in this property to eliminate that blight. And we're proposing to do so with what I believe everyone agrees is an attractive building or two buildings that are similar, which complies with your regulation and specifically with the design standard that you have in this regulation to appear residential in character. And it is designed and it will be built and it will be maintained to function well and to rent well and to be attractive for the long term. And it is complemented by a landscaping package that we just spent a fair amount of time discussing and a substantial amount of natural buffering. There also is no environmental or engineering issue that would rise to the level of a substantial public interest necessitating denial of the application. The development plan has been approved by the WPCA for sewer capacity. It's been approved by the Inland Wetlands Commission, which voiced no habitat related concerns. And we're proposing a compact development site in less footprint than the existing buildings within the already disturbed area, as Ryan explained in some detail, moving the buildings and the parking farther away from the wetlands and the pond on the site, maintaining a substantial portion of a large wooded parcel untouched. And this is on a site that has apartment buildings on two sides, which is important to remember because you've heard really almost entirely only from the single family neighborhoods that abut one portion of the site, one side of the site. But on Hazel Drive, there are two apartment developments already that abut this property on two sides. We're also putting in a new stormwater system that complies with all modern standards and will improve the water quality being discharged to the pond. And we've worked entirely within your regulation. We're not challenging the commission with an 830G application. We've proposed considerably less density than this regulation would allow, which would have been 147 units. And we've complied with your parking standards by designing a parking area allowing 2 spaces per unit. And we're not asking for an exemption or a waiver. We've shown where we can put the 2 spaces per units, but we believe it makes sense environmentally and based on all the data and the actual counts that traffic engineers have done to wait on constructing the 45 additional spaces. But if we get to a point at any time where the commission tells us, no, you need the additional 45, then we will put them in promptly. And other than adding a crosswalk, we really have had no need or no request to change the plans. We've worked with town staff throughout the process. You have no critical comments in front of you from the town engineering department, fire or police departments. And all of their comments, as Ryan mentioned, we view as minor, reasonable comments that we can agree to and we can satisfy rather easily. So it's really an unusually clean application in that regard in terms of having no engineering issues outstanding. And third, there is no traffic issue that rises to the level of a substantial public interest that would require you to deny this application. And we've tried to keep our discussion of the application as best we can within the standards of the regulations which define the scope of the commission's jurisdiction as established by Connecticut general statutes. And specifically, I just want to note the AHD regulation, this is 44A 7.2, provides that the commission shall consider whether on-site and resultant off-site traffic and circulation patterns create traffic safety hazards or substantial traffic congestion within the AHD or at intersections of AHD access drives and existing public streets. Meaning the commission has stated in the regulation that your consideration, your focus is going to be on the property and the access drives that intersect with the adjoining street. So I thought that was just important to point out as you're making your decision. Also, in the regulation, I think it's important to note that the site being within 500 feet of Waterbury Road is required for it to be eligible for consideration for zone change to AHD. That's in 44A.1, where you listed the standards that a property has to meet in order to be considered to be have its zone change to AHD. One of the things lists the location of the property, and the one that this one meets is that it's within 500 feet of Waterbury Road. So that in doing that, the commission really defined the appropriate properties for AHD zoning by their proximity to Waterbury Road and their access from Waterbury Road. And as we mentioned many times, Waterbury Road is a state highway. It was designed by the state DOT and it was built by DOT. And DOT has the ultimate jurisdiction over the road and the intersections with it, and it will decide what's needed for safety. It may impose some conditions and make us do some things, and that's a discussion we have to have with them. As Dave Sullivan said, we're required by virtue of the number of units in the development to make application to OSTA. And if you approve these applications, that is the next thing that we will do. And as Dave said, we will bring forward the concerns and the comments of the Cheshire Police Chief in that discussion. Other than that, the facts on this issue that you have before you are that the intersection of Hazel Drive with Waterbury Road operates at a level of service C right now and will operate at level of service C under the proposed conditions, which is considered a fine and acceptable level of service. You also heard that the data shows there have been no accidents in the last 3 years at the intersection of Waterbury Road and Hazel Drive, and that the sight lines were easily restored at that intersection by trimming back some vegetation. And so that's as to Hazel and Waterbury. And of course, we showed you that at the site driveway with both site driveways with Hazel Drive, the level of service will be A, as good as it can be. There is no sightline problem and there is no accident history to speak of. And what we are proposing in the peak hours anyway is really just a minor change from the traffic that would have been generated by the nursing home. So I would submit to you, there is no cause to deny this application over traffic issues. The second factor you have to look at then is whether there is such a substantial public interest that clearly outweighs the need for affordable housing. And so you, under your regulation, the way it's set up, this is a second of 2 hurdles, both of which have to be met. Otherwise, the commission said it shall approve the applications. And note the language that it must clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing, which means a close call is not enough. There really has to be some daylight in between the public interest and the need for affordable housing. So the need for affordable housing is really what determines the height of that hurdle. And we've really had no debate in this public hearing on that need. The need for affordable housing is well documented, it is clear, and it is substantial. And we submit to you that there have been no issues implicated by this proposal that will clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing and that clear both of those 2 hurdles. The third factor is whether there is a substantial public interest that can be protected, that cannot be protected by reasonable changes to the application. And without any issues that satisfy the first 2 hurdles, this is really a much shorter discussion. We've already made reasonable changes, we believe, to the proposal during the design phase. During our initial discussions with town staff, we made some tweaks to it before filing the applications. And so that is why we really haven't been asked to make many other changes to the plans during the hearing, except for adding the crosswalk. So importantly, I would submit there is no evidence before the commission demonstrating any need for any additional changes, except for maybe the few minor things we talked about tonight as to landscaping and that sort of thing. So we have shown you that both applications satisfy all of the requirements and standards for an affordable housing development application and satisfy all applicable zoning regulations. With just one other procedural thing with regard to the zone change application, as Ryan noted, to vote on the zone change, you do not need 2/3 to approve it because of the analysis we provided you of the protest petition showing that the area of the parcels, which had all of the owners for those parcels sign the petition, falls well short of 20% of the area of those lots. So in closing, I would offer that by approving these applications, you will be following through on a goal that the commission set in your plan of conservation and development. You will be showing the development community that you really meant it when you said you wanted to work together collaboratively with private sector development to provide affordable housing in an alternative to Section 830G. You will greenlight a substantial investment in the future of Cheshire, which will provide substantial improvements to and economically revitalize a dilapidated property and will benefit the community by helping fill an important need for moderately priced housing, which the community in the survey strongly supported. And finally, you will be allowing my client to make available a nice new place to live that can be afforded by folks like your teachers, your police officers, your firefighters, grocery store workers, and other people who deserve our thanks, and they deserve the opportunity to be able to afford a place to live in a great town like Cheshire. That's all from us. We thank you again, and we respectfully request your approval of both applications. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. We'll go around the horn one last time. Anyone?
Yes.
Mr. Natale?
Yep, I just want to I think it's more a procedural question. So do we have a comprehensive list of everything additional that we asked for? I know tonight it was brought up about, having more trees, having native species, fixing the fence. In the last public hearing, we talked about having sidewalks, not along the front of the property, but sidewalks leading out to the proposed crosswalk. Do we have that all documented, Bill, to be included in a potential motion, or how's that going to work?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll make sure we get it all, and we're not going to offer any motions tonight, but we'll make sure you have that, and you will have had a chance to review it. The applicant has given us some motions that we're having the town attorney review as to form. We will make sure that we add whatever the appropriate comment is regarding these types of conditions so the commission can have them to consider. So,
okay,
and also,
we'll do that. We'll have.
With saying that, he also agreed to everything that that he would do any of the stipulations that we put into all those.
Yeah,
okay,
we'll make sure you have a comprehensive list, Jeff. No problem.
Okay, thanks. And I guess the other question is kind of procedural too. I know that We've had some different opinions on these meetings about the 228 spaces versus the 183. You know, again, I still am torn on that one. So when it comes time for a motion, you know, if after thinking it over and seeing what comes from the town attorney, would that be the point where we would motion for an addendum to the motion, or?
So the town attorney's not gonna give you an opinion on whether you should, force them to build 228 versus the 183. The town attorney's not gonna give you an opinion on that.
Oh, no, I'm not looking for a town attorney to weigh in on that. I'm saying from this commission, would that be the point where, you know, let's say I say, in my opinion, we need the 200 and, you know, the full 228 spaces. Would that be the point when a motion is made to propose an amendment to that?
It'll be in the motion. It'll be in the motion, so.
Would we
We'll
vote
structure
separate?
the motion that you can require it, so
Yeah.
if you
Yeah,
want.
I'm not representing anybody else on the commission thinks that we should have the 228, but yeah, I just want to make sure that procedurally I do it right if that's what I feel.
Would we vote separately
Yeah,
on?
we'll make sure.
Would we vote separately on that, on authorizing the reduction in parking spaces from an overall vote on the application?
No, you don't necessarily have to do it that way, Lou. You're gonna have two motions, one on the zone change and one on the site development plan. We can include language in the site development plan and see how you wanna handle it when it comes up, so.
Yeah, one other issue, because it did come up just for this meeting tonight, about whether a 2/3 majority is required or a simple majority to approve. And Mr. Williams has given his opinion on it, and we've heard that, and that's great. But has the town attorney weighed in on that for us completely, Bill? We have.
Yeah, I actually emailed it to you. The town attorney agrees with Mr. Williams, so.
Okay, and that is that we do not need a 2/3, a 2/3
Correct.
vote. Okay.
Correct.
Jeff had brought up that,
Kind of,
that the people, they can't meet to talk about this or go to door. Do they feel that they've talked to who they need to talk to get the petitions correct?
Town attorney's opinion on that is there's no preclusion of, under the executive order. First of all, we've had no complaint that happened, and we've had 3 petitions with multiple signatures, some from people from out of town. So it's not as if we don't have petitions to start with. But the town attorney's opinion is, that electronic signatures are authorized, electronic notarizations are authorized, and that should an action be taken that raises that as an issue, it likely wouldn't stand based on the way the executive order is applied. But you remember, you've had multiple petitions with lots of signatures on them, many from out of town, actually, so.
I just wanted to bring up, well, one commission member requested that only native plants be used. I am always of the position that unless there's a reason that whatever the plans of the developer are, they can use them however, whatever plantings they wish, so long as it conforms to our zoning requirements.
Yeah, your zoning requirements are pretty loose when it comes to landscaping, so, and the applicant offered you a plan with specific species on it, so it's okay to ask for amendment of that, especially where the applicant has raised the fact that they did use primarily native species on the plan, so it won't be hard for them to do that.
So I know the applicant said that they would gladly work on any of our conditions. Is that including gills, some kind of noise study? Because that is one of my big concerns is there's enough.
Well, you're not going to ask, you can't, once you close a hearing, first of all.
Without the parking, if we determine we need that parking, I still think they should do something for noise abatement and planting, whether it's arborvitae, whatever type of plant that works there. But we should look at that and make sure that's done correctly for the people that across the board.
Well, they're saying that they will do that. So in either way, there'll be room along the lakeside to do something to augment the landscaping there. Won't be as much room, but there'll be room.
Okay. Seeing no other.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make one
Sure.
would
Closing,
too.
closing point. I just want to, I've never been, I've never felt forced, or not forced, but to actually commend Attorney Williams for what I thought was a very well thought out closing and summary of the case. So my kudos to you, Attorney Williams. It was very clear, very concise, and you covered all the points.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Linder. Mr. Dawson, did I hear you chime in?
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that for the record, anything that they committed to, we have a record of, and they wouldn't commit to something that they wouldn't do. So I think everything is pretty self-explanatory there.
Sure, they committed.
Is that correct, Bill? From my years of experience,
Oh, yeah,
that's
Woody,
the way
I don't,
it is.
they've agreed to do pretty much everything you've asked them to do. We'll make sure the record is complete with respect to that. We'll make sure that everything that you've asked for is in the motion. You'll have it, and they're not disagreeing with anything that's been asked for them.
That's what I was trying to make clear, that
Yep.
the redundant doesn't need to keep going, because what they committed to, they committed because they were offering it. So it's record.
Correct.
So
Yep.
I don't think we need to
Yeah,
question.
it's not unusual.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and have a good night, everybody.
Woody, don't go anywhere. We're not done yet.
No, I'm not leaving. I'm just saying, I'm sure the attorneys,
Okay.
other engineers want to leave. So
Well,
I
they're gonna-
realize I'll stay till the end, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman. I understand.
All right, great. Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, everybody. And we will be closing this public hearing.
Hey, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
We have one new comment Suzanne would like to read into the record.
I will not close the public hearing. One more comment coming into the, yes, go right ahead.
Yes, there were 24 comments that were submitted during the public hearing tonight, all of which are submitted by individuals that already submitted comments. There is one comment of note that differs from any of the other comments that were already read into the record, and that is from Rochelle Crino. And she writes, in regard to the number of signatures needed on a petition to change the voting count, due to the pandemic, it would be nearly impossible to acquire the amount of signatures needed and therefore should be waived. So that was the only comment that differed from what was already provided in testimony previously.
Okay, and we are going by our town attorney's opinion that that is not the case. So thank you very much for the comment. And I will go back to closing this public hearing. With that, I would take a motion to adjourn the public hearing. I'm sorry, number 3, the special permit was, they have a letter they tabled. Do we need to read the, Richard Chevrolet, do we need to read a letter into the record, or is it just tabled till 9/14/2000?
No, it's tabled, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, and then I would like
That's okay.
entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
So moved.
Moved by Mr., I don't even know who it was, Mr. Ricardo, seconded by Mr. Caderas. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, I'd like to call to order the Planning and Zoning regular meeting for Monday, July 27th, 2020. Can I get a motion to accept the minutes from the public hearing and special meeting from July 3rd, 2020?
Motion to approve both.
Moved by Mr. Second. Don't all jump at once. Anyone? Miss Don, I need a regular commission member though, Mr. Mercado. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Any changes, corrections of the minutes?
One possible question, I think it was on, I wasn't part of it, but what I was listening to on the brewery was what the license was. I don't know if it was beer only or not. I just wanted clarification on that.
Is that in the public hearing or the regular meeting?
Beer only.
I don't remember.
Okay. I believe he did state beer only. Is it, how is it written in the,
Yeah. It was beer only, but I wasn't 100% sure. I thought there was wavering on it.
no, the question was asked and he.
That's how Matt Hall answered the question. He said it was beer only.
Fair enough.
There was no wavering in the testimony.
Okay.
Okay, any other changes, corrections, anything?
Earl, I don't remember, this is Lou Tedisco, I know it's a big deal because it was unanimous, but I don't remember being disconnected from the Zoom virtual meeting on number one, but
You weren't. I think you were. You weren't there when we did the call to order, but you came in at some point. But I don't know why she has you down that way. Is
Right.
being
'cause I think I voted on this one.
yes, you I believe you did too.
Okay.
But the voting would have been in. Yes, yes, you were part of it, and she will have to change that for the record also. Okay, so we have all our commission members, our regular commission members are on here for this vote. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, motion unanimously. Thank you. Under communications, we have the letter from Ed Talbot. Do we have a motion for that? Is everyone ready to vote on that? We had it last time. How do you guys feel on
Mr.
voting?
Chairman, it's up to you.
For?
Yeah, that's on the capital, but, it's up to you guys. I mean, we really haven't had a chance to look at it. I'll leave that to your discretion. I have a motion if you wish. But you also have the ability to take some time in September to look it over and ask any specific questions if you wish. What would you like to do?
Let's take the time.
Yeah, let's take the time. Have we
Yeah.
ever gotten the full report on the capital budget like we did last year? I don't think we've received that, have we?
Yeah,
I don't
no,
have-
and we'll make sure you get it, Lou. So.
We got the section of it in our last packet, right? But just the section that pertained to us.
We'll
Yeah.
work it out, okay?
We got a month to deal with it, so more than a month, so that works for me. So we'll push that off, and then 1 and 2 we'll address in September. 3 public hearing. 9/14. Anything else to come before the commission tonight?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our regular meeting.
And make a motion, we adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Dawson, second by Mr. Picado. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All right, thank you all. See you in a month.
Yeah, have a good night.